Chess is easy. You're losing at chess because you're overcomplicating the simple stuff. Today I'm going to show you all the core fundamental stuff that you need to get better at chess. Not the same old develop the pieces, control the center. And these are not stuff that you're going to have to memorize. These are stuff that you'll understand. And I'm sure most of these stuff you haven't seen on YouTube. So if you watch the full video and just apply what I teach, you will get better. First opponent in the 500 region, they started with e4. Let's play e5. Knight f3 hits the pawn. I'll simply develop, guard the pawn. And this is an Italian game. Against Italian, I usually just develop my knight to f6. I'd always recommend the two knights defense. We're never going to be afraid of any fried liver attack. And we know that knight c3 is a mistake. My opponent is playing the fried liver attack, and there's a lot of ways to play against the fried liver attack. d5 is correct, knight takes e4 is correct, but we're going to be going for the Traxler counter attack, where we ignore the fact that they're going for a fork on the queen and the king and just develop. Now, the best move in this position is bishop takes. Anything that is not bishop takes is bad. So if knight takes f2 thinking, okay, that's a fork, white is actually losing. He decided to castle the king, which is weird. So he goes for the fried liver attack, but then he didn't take on f7. If they do this, just castle the king. Now it means that this knight to g5 move was just wasting time because all I'm going to do is to chase his knight out of my half of the board. But before I do that, let's just play pawn to d6 in this position. I want to be able to develop my bishop to g4. He develops his knight to c3. Now I hit him with pawn to h6. As we said, whenever there's a piece in your half of the board, it's very important that you chase that piece away from your half of the board. Obviously, putting the knight on the edge of the board is bad, so putting the knight back to f3 would be the best thing in this position. But then I'm able to now pin his knight to his queen, and this is the first plan in the Italian game. Do not allow the opponent to be pinning your pieces like this, because even though he's able to play h3 and immediately chase away my bishop, I'm not going to be giving up my bishop for a knight. I'm going to pull the bishop back to h5, maintaining the pin on the knight. And I still want to hit him with knight to d4, which would be applying pressure to this pin piece. And if he ever dares to play g4, then it means he's pushing pawns on the side that his king is on, and I'm going to sacrifice my knight. Now, he decided to play a3. Usually persons play a3 so that way if I play this move, the bishop is able to go back. But now let's just play knight to d4. The knight is pinned. We're applying some pressure to the pinned knight. The move that white has to now play is pawn to g4. Yeah, he just has to play pawn to g4. If pawn to g4 does not come on the board, then we're going to be seeing a quick checkmate for the first game. If you play the Italian or play against the Italian, take note of what's happening. He decided to develop his bishop, and here's the reason why he's about to get checkmated. What I'm about to do is expose his king. I'm going to start by playing the move knight takes f3, which checks the king, and he has to take my knight. I mean, he doesn't have to take the knight, but if he doesn't take the knight, he's just down by a knight. Now, once he takes, I want you guys to notice how my bishop is now pinning this pawn to the queen. All I need to do from this position is try to apply more pressure to his pinned pawn. And that's where a move like knight to h7 comes in. Knight to h7 is actually a very nice move. I'm actually trying to put my knight on the g5 square, which would be hitting the pawn on h3 and the pawn on f3 at the same time. The opponent took the bishop. It's not over. I'm gonna play a tactic called an in-between move. Like the average player watching this is probably like, they take the bishop, let's just take back. No, the guy's king is exposed. We're going for the exposed king. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna play the move knight to g5. This is called an in-between move. The bishop no longer covers the square. Keep in mind, I'm down by a piece, but even if he tries to pull the bishop back, it's over. There's nothing he could do to guard this f3 pawn. He moves his queen to e2. That's not gonna help. Now here's how I'm gonna checkmate this guy. Again, we're not taking this bishop. I'm gonna start by playing the move knight takes f3, and that's a check. If he wants to sack his queen, that's on him. He moves his king to g2. Already in this position, I could win his queen if I wanted the queen. But we don't want to be too materialistic when we're playing chess. We're trying to go for the king. Knight to h4 is a discovered attack which would win his queen. But because I'm going for the king, I'm going to be bringing more pieces in the attack. Now I have three pieces in the attack, checking his king. His king now has to go to the h1 square. And again, all I'm going to do here is play queen to h4. No, queen to h4. Queen to h4 was bad, actually. I needed to play queen to f4. Queen to f4, and yeah, that would have been GG's earlier. But this will also be GG's because he decided to sack his queen. So let's just take on f3 with check. The king now has to go here. And then once the king goes here, this is like checkmate in 1, 2, 3. I'm going to give a check now on f4, and the king is now not able to go to h1 due to my bishop. So the king now has to go to g1, and then I'll pull my queen back to g5 with check. The king's going to be forced to go to h2, and then that's going to be a checkmate. So let's give a check on f4. He moves his king to g1. Now we check on g5. The king now has to go to h2, and that's a checkmate. What have we learned? The fried liver attack is not really good because you're moving the same piece more than once in the opening stage of the game. We're going to be doing the same thing against someone at the 600 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 600 region. He started off by playing e4. Let's just play e5. And then after knight f3, we develop the knight, guard the pawn, and then he's also playing the Italian game. Now, let's play the two knights defense against someone at the 600 level. And then he plays pawn to d3. This is the correct move that I recommend when someone plays the two knights defense. From here, though, I'm just going to be developing my pieces. Now I have 3 out of 4 pieces developed, and my opponent decided to castle the king. Now, what I recommend when you're playing against the Italian game, just delay your castling for a bit. Play a move like pawn to d6, so that way you could try to pin the opponent's knight. If you're ever able to pin someone's knight whenever their king is castled in the Italian game, you're winning the game. However, my opponent played pawn to c3, and that's a nice move because now if I pin the knight, I won't be able to apply pressure to the knight. So that's a very nice move. That's also one way to do it. And with that being said, pinning the knight is actually not really a good move anymore. So now I'm going to go bishop to e6. That's another thing that you guys want to keep in mind. If you're not able to play bishop to g4, for example, maybe he could have played h3. He decided to play knight to d2. And now I'm going to play queen to d7. So basically, I completed my development. I moved my queen. Once I castled my king, then I could start my attack. He moves his rook out the way. The plan from here is basically to play moves like knight to f1, knight to g3. But now it's time to start my attack. Let's first start by playing bishop to g4. First of all, now I'm pinning the knight, and you guys are probably saying, why did you move the bishop to e6, then to g4? I kind of wanted him to play h3 because h3 is bad. And this is something that I want you guys to use a lot. Like, please use this a lot. This is called a battery. Notice that my queen and my bishop is working together on this diagonal. Once he plays h3, I'm now able to sacrifice my bishop. I wasn't able to do that before, but now my queen is on d7. If he dares to touch my bishop, I just have too many pieces in the attack and he's going to be getting checkmated. Now, this is not like a forced checkmate sequence. If white decided to play all the top engine moves, then he could survive, but he's not going to find all the top engine moves. He took the pawn. Let's now take with the queen. I want you guys to notice how my bishop here is on the same line as his king. With that being said, a move like queen to g3 check will always be possible. In fact, a lot of times the opponent has a piece on g3 and you're still going to be able to take it because of this pin. Now, my next move in this position is to play knight to g4, but my opponent decided to attack my queen, and this is exactly what I was talking about. His knight is unprotected. His king is exposed. Now, before I play the move queen to g3, the king has to move. We grab the knight, and that's just winning. When we're trying to find the best move on the chessboard, it's very important that we start by looking on the most forcing moves first. So a check is forcing, but that's also a forcing move. If I play bishop takes f2, he plays king takes f2. Now I'm looking for my follow-up checks. Knight to g4 check. If he sat the queen, we take the queen. If he puts the king here, we check. King has to go here, and that's mate. And if he puts his king on e2, that's a checkmate. So And another thing that I want to teach you guys is whenever you see a good move in chess, always look for a better one. Bishop takes f2, check. There's nothing in which his king could do, so the king has to take the bishop. Now, all I'm going to do is hit him with knight to g4 check, and it's a GG's. Even though my queen is under attack. King to g1 leads to checkmate in 2, king to e2 leads to checkmate in 1. He moves the king to g1, but this is not mating 2. I could check, king has to move, and that's going to be a checkmate. But I could also check here. If the king goes here, that's going to be a checkmate. And if the king goes here, knight f2 is going to be a checkmate. He moves his king to f1, but that's a checkmate. What have we learned? Allowing a bishop to pin your knight in the Italian game could be deadly. Even deadlier if you try to chase away that bishop and it's already communicating with the queen. We're going to be doing the same thing against someone at the 700 level. Stay card. Our opponent is now in the 700 region. He started off with e4. We're going to be playing e5 here, keeping things simple. He develops his knight to attack my pawn. I'll simply develop my knight, guarding my pawn, and then he's playing what we call the two knights game. Now, the whole thing is called a three knights game. I'm going to develop my knight, and this is now called the four knights game. Now, pawn to d3 was played. Looks as if he's trying to develop this bishop, but he's blocking out this bishop. Now, I'm not able to punish him for this, so the best I could do is just continue with my development. We now have 3 out of 4 pieces developed. The goal from here is just to castle the king and get the last bishop developed. Now, the bishop comes to g5, pinning my knight. We spoke about this. If a piece is on your half of the board at any time, you want to immediately chase that bishop away. Now, taking on f6 is what a lot of persons do, which is incorrect. If you watch my videos, stop doing this. Don't be giving up your bishops for knight, because now I'm just going to take. And usually they think just because they manage to play knight to d5, they attack the queen, they threaten a fork. Like, once you're able to see this, you're fine. Just pull the queen back. We have the 2 bishops. This is all we need. I want you to now keep in mind that I'm the only one who is dominating with a dark squared bishop. And then he made another mistake, pawn to d4. Now, the reason why he made this move is so that way he's able to develop his light squared bishop. But the guy doesn't know how to comp because I'm covering the square 3 times. He's only covering the square twice. The thing is though, if I take with my knight here, I'm leaving this pawn unprotected, but I'm still gonna do it. And the reason why I'm still gonna do it is if his knight take my pawn and I castle my king, he's still 2 moves away from getting castled. So the moment he tries to get castled, I'll hit him with rook to e1 and start my attack on his king. He took, let's just go bishop takes, maintaining this attack on his weak f2 pawn. Here he needs to just develop and get castled. I'm ahead by a pawn. And then he plays bishop to b5, another move that you guys should not play. This is a mistake, by the way. I do have a tactic in this position. I want you guys to notice how the knight and the bishop, they sit adjacent to each other on the same color. This is the pattern that you should be looking for when it comes to pawn forks. Now I'm able to play the move pawn to c6, which hits the knight and the bishop at the same time. This is called a fork. To find the best move in chess, you want to put pieces on the opponent's half of the board, but you don't necessarily want to be putting pieces on the opponent's half of the board when the game just begins. You want to focus on your development first. Now it's over. So he plays c3. This is a counter attack on my bishop. And because he's already forked, I'm not going to just take his knight. Well, I actually could take his knight. This is a very nice line. I could take his knight, and then if he takes my bishop, there's another fork in the position. So let's take the knight. I want you guys to be able to guess the moves and find them. So let's see if you'll be able to find another fork if he takes my bishop. Well, he did not take my bishop. He chose to take a pawn instead. I would have hit him with queen a5, by the way, but because my bishop is now under attack, let's just let's just pull the bishop back to b6, maintaining this diagonal pointing towards the king, and then he decided to castle his king. Now, my goal from here is to start an attack on his king. My king is in the center of the board, so I'm just going to castle, get my king out the center of the board, and start my attack. Now, he decided to play c4. My development is not complete at this point, so let's play d6. All I need to do to finish my development is to develop my light squared bishop. He plays rook to c1, doesn't do much. I'm going to play. This is how I want you guys to be thinking. Notice how my bishop is on the same line as his king. I want you to also put your queen on the same line as his king. Like all the pieces are coming in. Once I hit him with something like bishop to g4, hit the queen with the idea of playing bishop to h3, threaten a mate on g2, that's when the game is going to be over. So he moves his king out the way. That's also something that I want to see you guys doing. If someone puts their piece on the same line as your king, just move the piece out the way. Okay, now before I develop my bishop, which would be the most principled move, like bishop to f5, I'm going to play the move pawn to f5. Now, this is me starting my attack. And what I talk to you guys about attacking is when it comes to attacking, you want to do what is called a pawn storm. Now, my opponent just played the move rook to g1, which is a mistake. This is called a drawback mistake, where before you make a move, always look on what your piece was doing. For example, the rook on f1 was guarding f2. Moving the rook on g1 no longer guards f2. So now I'm able to play bishop takes f2, and I am attacking the rook, which is forced to move again. He moves his rook out the way. My bishop is under attack. But what I want you guys to keep in mind is whenever one of your pieces is under attack, remember the best way to defend is to play an attacking move. So I could just pull my bishop back, but it would give him the tempo. So I'm going to put my bishop on e3, hitting the rook because offense is the best defense. Now he's forced to react to the fact that his rook is under attack. Then I'm going to use the time to continue with my attack. He moves his rook out the way. Now I'm going to hit him with f4, just moving my pawns forward. I'm still trying to find a good square to develop my bishop. It could go to g4, it could go to f5. He plays pawn to c5, which again, a bad move because it's a counting issue. Again, I'm covering the square twice. He's underguarding the square once. Now, before I take the free pawn, I'm going to play something called an in-between move. Basically, I'm going to take the free pawn, but first I'm going to do is develop my bishop, completing my development, attacking his queen, again, forcing the opponent to be constantly reacting to my move. This is called initiative. If you're playing, it's always best to play an attacking move. And then once the opponent defend against it, you play another attacking move. That's how you're going to be winning your games. The queen moves out the way, and I'm still checking to see if I could play a more aggressive move. I'm not seeing an aggressive move, so now I'm going to take the free pawn. We're now ahead by 5 points. Not sure if I mentioned this, but once you're ahead in material, the goal is start to trade as much pieces off the board. So that is my plan. I want you guys to also notice every single piece that I have is doing a role, except one piece, which is this rook. Now, my opponent played the move pawn to h4, which is another mistake. Even though I have to move my queen, in chess, you should not be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on. This really weakens your king. What am I going to do? I'm just going to move my queen to h5. It points my queen towards his king. Remember, always try to point your pieces towards the opponent's king. My plan from here is to apply as much attack to this pawn or chase away his queen from guarding the pawn. Keep in mind that if the queen is not guarding this pawn and I take, that could lead to a checkmate. So he pulls the bishop back, another counting mistake. Like, I see this mistake so much at the lower level where persons they just don't count properly and they don't recognize batteries. Like, because the queen and the bishop is on the same diagonal, it actually means I'm supporting the e2 square twice. He's only guarding it once. So once I take on e2 here, that's just a free bishop. And his rook on f1 is trapped. Nowhere ahead by 8 points. The goal is to start trading, but looks as if this guy's just gonna give me all his material. Now he plays rook to g1. I could take the rook, but I'm trying to go for checkmate instead. How am I going to do this? I'm going to start by playing the move pawn to f3. It cuts off his rook from covering this round. I want to play pawn to f2, forking the rook and the queen. And if he dares to take on f3, my bishop is able to take and check his king. So he did decide to take on f3. Now I'm going to take with the bishop, checking his king. He's now forced to react to this move. I'm thinking king to h2 is the only idea here. And then he plays king to h2. Now, here's what I'm seeing. Queen takes h4 is a checkmate. It's not a checkmate. The reason why it's not a checkmate is because the queen guards it. Apart from that, it would be a checkmate. What I want to do is either remove the guard, like there's just so many moves that is winning here. That's a pin, that's a rook, but Instead, I'm going to play the move rook to f4. Now, what I want you guys to learn from this game is whenever you see a good move, always look for a better move. And in chess, checkmate is what ends the game. It's not necessarily trying to win material. He moves his king to g3. Okay. Nothing is under attack here. By the way, I'm thinking of checking him right here, but then the king goes back. And then if I takes, his queen is able to take. That's not going to lead to a checkmate. I could check with the rook though. And then if he takes here, then he could lose all his material. Or I could simply bring the rest of my pieces in the attack. So I want you guys to notice, I see how I could win the rook. I see how I could win the queen. I see how I could win this rook, but checkmate ends the game. He puts the king back on g2, and this is the checkmate that we're trying to set up. Now I'm going to play the move rook takes h2. If he dares to take my rook, then queen takes is going to be a checkmate. With that being said, the king now has to go to g3, and if he moves the king to g3, then that's going to be a checkmate. He moves the king to g3, and that's a checkmate. What have we learned? Do not give up your bishops for knights. Understanding counting is very important, fundamental to learn. Now we're going to be using the same thought process against someone at the 800 level. Stick around. Now, our opponent is 800. Let's start with e4. We're going to be using this same thought process to win all the games. Development in the start. This is the standard Italian game, so we know exactly what is happening here. We're getting our minor pieces developed. The opponent plays the two knights defense. We're not going to be playing the fried liver attack. We know why that is not good. Let's just play pawn to d3. The plan from here is to castle the king and develop our other pieces. Bishop to c5 was played. The opponent is developing very well. Let me get my king out the center of the board. The opponent also castles their king. And now I'll play knight c3. Now I have three of my pieces developed. The opponent also has three pieces developed. And they are also planning on developing their bishop. But now I'm going to develop my bishop, pinning the knight to the queen. And the first plan in the Italian game is to apply pressure to the pinned knight. So black has to be a bit careful here. If he allows me to play knight d5, then it's immediate game over. So h6 or bishop to e6 makes some sense. h6 was played. I'll pull the bishop back though, and I'm still maintaining the pin on the knight. So I was just about to say g5. This is like the third plan of the Italian game, where if you're pinning the knight and you want to apply pressure and they chase away your bishop with h6, g5, just sacrifice the knight. Because now once they take the knight and my bishop takes, that's now like a permanent pin. It's like, yes, we're down by a piece, but how will black get out of this pin? Coupled with the fact that we're threatening knight d5. So bishop to e6 has to be played here. And then our plan from here is what's the quickest way to apply pressure to this pinned knight? And that's what I want to show you guys. Okay, knight back to d7 was played. The opponent wants to pull pieces back in the defense, but it's crazy because now the knight is just free because the queen is no longer guarding the knight. That's called drawback chess. Now all I need to do is play queen h5 followed by queen h8, and that's going to be a checkmate. This knight is pinned, so it has nowhere to go. Bishop to e6 was played, but I don't even need to pay attention to this. Once I played queen h5, remember when we said to look on the opponent's half of the board to find the best move? There's nothing that black could do to prevent queen to h8 checkmate. If queen to e8 was played, but that's just a checkmate. What have we learned? When playing against the Italian game, try to play h6 before you castle, so that way your knight is not pinned. Don't be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on. We're going to be doing the same thing against 900 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 900 region. Started off with e4. Let's hit him with e5. Knight f3 attacks my pawn. Knight c6 guards the pawn. And then this one is playing the three knights game. Once I develop my knight, this is the four knights game. This is like super principled. And then on to d4, this is going to lead into the Scotch game. Let's take on d4. Now, once the knight takes, from here, what we want to do is just develop our pieces. We don't necessarily want to go bishop to c5 though. We want to play bishop to b4. It's more forcing because we pin the knight. With that being said, his e4 pawn is under attack. If he is not careful on what he's doing, I could just win the pawn on e4. So he took the knight. That's the correct move. We don't want to take with the d pawn because I'm going to be trading the queens off the board. So let's take with the b pawn. The idea here is to play d5 and control the center. I'm still threatening to win his pawn on e4 because his knight is unprotected. He plays bishop to d2. Now, I have a chance of removing the guard tactic, but it doesn't work because if I takes the knight and he takes the bishop, the knight guards the pawn. If I take the pawn, the bishop takes on g7. With that being said, first I'm going to castle my king, which means my king is safe and the g7 pawn is guarded. So on the next move, I'm going to win a pawn. He plays a3. The goal is to chase away my bishop, but this is just a removing the guard tactic. I'm going to play the move bishop takes c3 because the knight guards the pawn. And then it doesn't really matter what he used to recapture. My knight taking on e4 is just a free pawn. And just like that, we're ahead by a pawn. So he plays queen to g4. That's a very interesting move because he's threatening a checkmate on g7, but he's also attacking my unprotected knight. My knight is poisoned though. I don't necessarily need to protect the knight, but I just don't want to play a defensive move. Like I could play g6 and if he takes my knight, I pin the queen, but I don't want to play a defensive move. Offense is the best defense. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm just going to get rid of the bishop. Get rid of the bishop. It opens up this e-file for my rook. And you want to also notice that his queen is on the same line as my bishop. Things are about to get crazy. Now, here's how we're going to start our attack. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to hit him with pawn to d5. I have to control the center. I have to develop my bishop. I mean, the guy's 900. I'm assuming he knows what a discovered attack is, moving the pawn all the way, hitting the queen. But then once he moves the queen, his king is in the center of the board. What do we do to people who keep their king in the center of the board? We attack them. He puts the queen back on e1, and I'm already predicting what's going to happen. I'm going to check him on e8. Maybe he thinks, oh, I'm just going to block with the bishop and castle. But the bishop is pinned. And what do we do when we're pinning the opponent's pieces? We apply pressure to the pin piece and we're going to win a bishop. So let's hit him with rook to e8 check. Now, if he moves his king to d2, that ends the game faster. He did play bishop to e2. Again, my rook pins the bishop. Whenever you're pinning a piece, you should PP on the PP. Now he has to lose material. And then even if he decides to castle his king, his rook is going to be on f1. Pawn to c4 is a good try, but I'm just going to take on c4. It's the exact same thing. He's just giving me an extra pawn in the process. Again, if he castles his king, his rook is going to be on f1. My bishop is going to take. It happens. This is called a fork, by the way. Once my bishop takes, it attacks both the queen and the rook at the same time, which means he is forced to move his queen out of the way. And then once he moves his queen out of the way, I grab the rook and I'm just going to be ahead by an entire rook. He moves the queen. Now we grab the rook. He took back with the rook. And from here, all we want to do is trade pieces off the board. Let's just play queen to e7 here. Queen to f6 was also a good move, by the way, because the goal is to trade. He plays h3, because he's not trying to get background checkmate. Let's just go rook to b8. It's very important that you put your rooks on open files because once your rooks goes on open files, there's like a lot of fancy things that could happen. For example, I'm setting up a very, very nice queen sacrifice. I'm not sure if it's going to work, so let me show you guys what I'm thinking. I'm going to play queen to e2 with the whole idea of sacrificing my queen, because if his king takes rook to b8, it's going to be a checkmate. So let's go queen to e2 here. And if he thinks, oh, that doesn't do anything, let me just take more free pawn, he's going to get checkmated. Took the pawn, my fellow viewers. I tricked him. This is crazy. Queen takes f1. That's a free rook. King can't take my queen. Because if he dares to touch my queen, my fellow viewers, wait for it. He didn't take the queen. He didn't take the queen, which means I'm ahead by two pieces. Let's just get the queens off the board and just win a normal game. So he moves his king. Let's just take the pawn. From here, I'm just going to get my rooks in the game. I'm trying to checkmate him on the g2 square now. Like, if I'm able to get a rook on e2, take on g2, that's mate. I have to be careful though Okay, he sacrificed his queen. He's basically just giving up. Let's just take it's gonna be, and then he resigns. What have we learned? Don't be taking out your queen this early with your king in the center of the board. We're gonna be doing the same thing against someone at the 1000 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1000 region. He started off by playing e4. Let's play e5 here. And then plays knight to c3. Looks like we're going to be getting a Vienna game. But let's play knight to c6 here, see what he's coming with. He plays knight to f3. This is called the three knights game. Just by following principled stuff, developing both of our knights, this is the four knights game. Very good way to play. And then he plays d4. Now, because he plays d4, he's immediately threatening to win my pawn or push his pawn. So we're going to take on d4. And this is actually a transposition into something that is called a Scotch game. After knight takes, I'm going to hit him with the move bishop to b4, developing my bishop, pinning his knight to the king, which means his pawn on e4 is under attack. My goal from here is to get my king out the center of the board, develop my last piece, then start my attack. He decided to take the knight. Obviously, I don't want to take with the d pawn because he's just going to trade the queens and then I'll lose my right to castle. So let's simply take with the pawn in this position. I am still attacking his e4 pawn, so he still has to be careful here. He decided to play a3, which is losing a pawn because now I'm able to take the knight. He took my bishop. Now I'm gonna, well, do I take? Yes. Now we take the free pawn on e4, and just like that, we're ahead by a pawn. I am also attacking his unprotected pawn on c3. And what he did here is he pins my knight to my king. But here's what I'm going to do. I noticed that his queen and the king is on the same line. With that being said, I'm just going to castle my king. My knight is actually untouchable because if he dares to take my knight, rook to e8 will pin his queen to his king. So he just has to keep developing here and he has to solve the issue of this pawn being unprotected. So he decided to play queen to c4. Makes some sense. Like, it guards his pawn. How do we continue here? I have a very nice idea. Now keep in mind, the move that I would love to play is d5, but he gets the chance to take on f6. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm actually going to play the move queen to f6, threatening f2, threatening c3 twice. If his queen takes on e4, he leaves the c3 pawn unprotected, which means he's going to get forked. And once I play d5, my queen will now be guarding my pawn on c6. So he decided to play f3, attacking my knight. Fair enough. If I play d5 and attack his queen, and he decides to take my knight, he will still lose a rook. This is called danger levels. Even though the opponent is attacking 3 points first, he's not able to take that 3 points if we attack something more valuable than 3 points. So a move like pawn to d5 would be something. But knight takes e3 is also just a free pawn though. And if I play d5, he plays queen to d4. So let's take on c3 first. Let's take on c3. He's not able to take my knight. I'm currently threatening to play moves like rook to e1. Bishop to b2 looks like a very strong move, but it does not work. So he develops his bishop. It's very evident that he wants to get his king out the center of the board. But if you're watching this video coming up to 1000, you know that we don't allow people to get castled if we castle before them. So I'm going to hit him with the move rook to e8, checking the king. Now I'm basically forcing him to move the king. Once he moves the king, all castling rights is out the way, and that's how my attack is going to start coming in. He decided to block with the bishop. Very bad move, by the way. It's like this move, there's just so much ways to win here. The first way to win, I could just take the bishop because the moment he takes back, it's actually a discovered attack. It opens this diagonal pointing towards his rook. So I'm just going to win a rook. Another way how I could win this game is just play pawn to d5. I am pinning the bishop, and if we're pinning a piece, we should apply pressure to the pin piece, and it attacks his queen. So let's just play pawn to d5. And again, I want you guys to keep in mind, whenever you see a good move, look for a better one. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't play the good move that you saw. If you didn't see a better move, then play your good moves, because now he's forced to move the queen. And once he moves the queen, I could still take on e4 and win his rook. Mm. Mm. Bishop to g5. That's an interesting move. Okay, for one, I did not see that move. If I take his queen, he takes my queen. If I take his bishop, he takes my knight. But then I take his bishop and I'm just completely better. But then he gets to castle the king, and I don't want him to get castled. So if I take his bishop and he takes my knight, I'm going to go bishop a6, and that's going to keep his king in the center of the board. Now, I could also just play queen to e5 and, go with the same idea. But let's just take the bishop. We're going to be ahead by an entire piece, and his king is going to be stuck in the center of the board. In addition to all of that, after queen takes e3, what is preventing me from just taking a free pawn on g2 and it attacks his rook? I'm sure he's not trying to castle on the queen side, right? So he took on c3. I'm very conflicted here. If I take a free pawn, maybe he runs to the queen side. Maybe. So let's just... Okay, but then if I go here, he takes this pawn, hit the bishop, and then he takes the bishop. But then I take with check, that's a discovered attack. And he's going to be forced to move his king, and he could be getting checkmated. So let's play bishop to a6. It's very important to not allow your opponent's king to get to safety here. I am going to be ahead by a piece. Now, if he finds queen takes c6 followed by queen takes a6, I'm not going to be ahead by a piece, but his king is going to be checkmated. So he took on c6. He found the move. I'm just going to take on e4 though. Like, I promise you, if this guy takes my bishop, he's going to be checkmated. He's not able to castle on the king side. He's not able to castle on the queen side. Let's see if he's going to take the bishop. I want him to take the bishop. This is going to be very instructive. So he decided to play king to f2. He did not take the bishop. But, okay, how do I still win this game? There's just so many ways to win. His king is just not safe. The first thing I'm looking on is to take the pawn on f3. And if he takes the bishop, queen takes g2 is a checkmate. If he decides to take with the queen, rook to d2 could lead to a checkmate. Another thing I'm looking on is to play queen to d2 immediately. And then if he moves his king to g3, I take on f3 and that could lead to a checkmate. There's so many ways to win this. Let's start by taking on e3. Again, if he takes my bishop, he's going to get checkmated. If he tries to go back and defend with his queen, my rook joins the attack. So this has to lead to something. He moves his king to e1, but he didn't properly look on the position because my queen attacks the g2 square. That's just a checkmate. We're gonna be doing the same thing against players at the 1100 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1100 region. He started off by playing e4. Let's hit him with e5. He attacks my pawn. Let's develop defending the pawn. And he's playing the Roy Lopez. This is also called the Spanish game. Whenever they do this, what I like to do is just develop my bishop to c5 because I don't mind if they take this knight thinking they're winning material because my knight is guarding my pawn. Another good move we could play here is pawn to a6, chasing away the bishop. He decided to castle his king. From here, I'm going to play pawn to d6. My whole idea from here is to develop my bishop, pinning the knight to the queen. And we already know what happens once we're pinning the knight to the queen. Okay, so he plays pawn to d3 here, and I'm actually not going to pin the knight to the queen because if I pin the knight to the queen, he's going to play h3, and the fishing pole won't work, and I'm also not able to apply pressure to his knight. So I'm just going to play pawn to a6 here, just chasing away his bishop. If he takes the knight, then I'm fine with that. Bishops are better than knights. He didn't do it, so now I'm going to try to apply pressure to his pinned knight. Now, before we do that, I'm going to play the move pawn to b5 just to ensure that he moves away the bishop again. Now I can hit him with bishop to g4 because right now I'm threatening to apply pressure to the pin knight. But if you're playing with the white pieces here, just play pawn to e3 to prevent this, or knight to d2, or you could even play pawn to h3. Like, there's a lot of ways to not lose in this position. So he decided to play pawn to h3. Now, the fishing pole trap, in theory, does not work because after h5 takes, he is able to play knight to g5, but it's... So with that being said, let's just pull the bishop back, maintaining the pin on the knight. Here I'm just looking to develop my knight, get my king castled. I could also castle my king on the queen side, but because I've moved so many pawns on the queen side, I doubt it. So he moves his rook over to e1, decent move. Applying pressure to the knight here is not necessarily going to help me because, again, he's able to play knight to d2, support the knight. He could also hit me with g4. So from here, let's just prioritize our development. However, I'm actually going to put my knight on e7, not f6, because I just don't like the idea of having a piece unprotected, and my knight on c6 was left there unprotected. He develops his bishop. That's a decent move. Let's now get our king out the center of the board. If he wants to take, I'll take back. That's on him. That's fine if he takes though, because my queen is now a bit more open. The opponent now played the move queen to d2, which is a huge mistake, by the way. First of all, the knight should go to the d2 square. There's no pawn on c3, and the queen was guarding the knight on f3. Now that the queen is no longer guarding the knight on f3, I'm going to take the knight on f3. Yes, I am going to be giving up my bishop for a knight. And the reason why I'm going to be giving up a bishop for a knight is once he takes my bishop, his king is just going to be super exposed. So he took the pawn. I want you guys to notice how both of these pawns are unprotected and this king is exposed. So it's time to start our attack. I'm going to start my attack by playing the move knight to g6. And I want you guys to notice how I'm attacking. I'm trying to maneuver as much pieces over to the king side here. For example, I'm trying to get my queen to h4 to attack this. I'm trying to get my knight to h4 to attack this. If he takes on c5 and I take back, I'm going to try to get my knight to d4 to attack this. So he decided to develop his knight. Now we want to start attacking these pawns. Now here's what my issue is. If I play the move knight to g4, then it's just too easy for him to... Oh wait, but there's a trick. Oh, there's a trick. I'm gonna play knight h4. So here was my issue. If I hit him with knight h4, attack this fork, he's just gonna play queen to d2 and defend it. But this is where the trick comes in. I'm not gonna be able to play knight to d4, which attacks the queen and threaten the fork. But then he's probably gonna be like, okay, that's fine. Let me just get rid of the bishop. But then his bishop will no longer be covering the g5 square. And if he does that, I'm going to hit him with queen to g5 check. The king has to move. Then I'm going to hit him with queen to g2 checkmate. So let's see if this works. So knight to h4. Remember what we said about finding the best move, and it has a lot to do with evaluating the position. Like, you don't just look on the opponent's half of the board and be like, okay, best move, let's put a piece there. No, you have to be able to see what you're looking for. So for example, I noticed that the opponent's king is exposed. I noticed that these pawns are unprotected, and I noticed that I need to attack there. And that's how I'm now finding the moves that relate to those squares. So he moves the queen over to e2. We spoke about this, and this is not hope chess, by the way. I don't want you to think I'm playing hope chess. Like, if I hit him with queen to knight to d4 and he decides to move the queen, I'm gonna take, and that's gonna be a fork. So let's hit him with knight to d4. This is called a fork, by the way. This same knight attacks f3 and the queen at the same time. And if he thinks he's getting away, oh, let me just take the knight, draw back. Drawback mistake. We spoke about that. Check to see what a piece was doing before you move that piece out the way. Oh my, he took it. He took it. The bishop no longer guards the g5 square. And that's why we're not going to take the bishop. We're going for the king. We're not going to hit him with queen to g5. Check. It really doesn't matter where he puts the king. If he goes here, if he goes here, if he goes here, queen to g2 is going to be a checkmate. So maybe he's going to resign here. He moves the king, and that's a checkmate. But what have we learned? This guy made two drawback mistake. The queen was guarding the knight. He moves the queen. He no longer guards the knight. The bishop was guarding the g5 square. He moves the bishop. It's no longer guarding the g5 square. Stop blundering due to drawback mistakes. We're going to be doing the same thing, but against someone at the 1200 level. So stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1200 region. He started off by playing d4. Let's play d5 here, keeping things simple. And he's playing a London system. Good time to show you guys how to beat the London system. Here I'm just going to be developing my pieces very normally. He develops his knight. And a very important move that I want you guys to play against the London or against any d4 move is just to play pawn to c5. You attack the opponent's center. It allows your queen access to this b2 pawn, and it's just better than playing knight c6. So he plays c3 to guard his center. Let's just go knight c6. Now that we play pawn c5, queen is going to b6. He plays e3, and now we're going to play the move queen to b6, immediately targeting his weak b2 pawn. Usually the best way to react to this is a move like queen to b3, just trying to get the queens off the board. But the best move for black here is to play pawn to c4. It attacks the queen, forcing the queen to take. And then once the queen takes, my pawn takes. And just like that, my rook gets an open file. Now, knight to d2 was played. We have to be careful. We don't necessarily want to allow moves like pawn to e4. But I'm actually going to play pawn to b5 here, supporting c4 in case he plays e4. But I also want to play a move like b4 and target his c3 pawn and get rid of my double pawns. Now, he decided to play a move like pawn to b3, which makes some sense. Let's just develop our bishop here. I don't want to take because then his knight is going to take. My next plan is just to get my dark squared bishop developed. I already have three of my pieces developed. You could say we are in an endgame, but there's still a lot of minor pieces on the board. Now, he decided to play knight to h4, which it's a decent move. He's trying to get rid of my good bishop. I'm going to pull the bishop back to d7. Even though all my pawns are on light squares, I still do not want to give up my bishop for his knight, especially now that his knight is on the edge of the board. I prefer to pull my bishop back to h7. So he develops his bishop to e2 here, and here's what I'm going to do. We're going to start by playing h6. I'm threatening a fork because, the pieces are adjacent to each other, so pawn to g5 would be a fork, but I actually want him to pull his knight back to f3, so that way I'm able to put my bishop back to f5. And then if he decides to put his knight back to h4, my bishop now gets the h7 square. So he decided to castle his king. Let's now play e6. I'm just trying to get my last piece developed. I have a very nice idea of playing bishop to a3 with the whole idea of just trapping his rook and attacking this weak pawn. He plays bishop to e5. That's already just a bad decision because he's just inviting me to take the bishop, and bishops are better than knights, so that's not something that you should just want to allow. Now, I'm not in any rush to take that bishop. I'm just going to finish my development, bishop to a3. I'm now threatening to target this weak pawn on c3. Remember what I tell you guys? It's not just about, okay, let me close my eyes and put pieces on the opponent's half of the board. You have to be able to evaluate the position, see where the weaknesses are, see where the unprotected pieces are, knowing when the opponent's king is weak. He decided to put his knight back on the edge of the board, which is bad. I'm not going to allow him to take my bishop. In fact, a move like bishop to b2 is already winning because if I play bishop to e2, he takes my knight, I take back the knight, he has to move the rook, and then I take a pawn. But then his bishop takes here and I get triple pawns. Let's not get triple pawns. So I'm going to pull my bishop back to h7. You notice how my light squared bishop, which is my bad bishop, I'm ensuring that I keep my bishop outside of the pawn chain. If my bishop on h7 was on d7, then that would have been a terrible bishop. If his bishop on e5 was on, let's say, d2, then it would have been a terrible bishop. So whenever you have a bad bishop, try to ensure that you keep it outside of the pawn chain. Now he plays f4. Now, that's obviously a mistake. I guess he doesn't want me to play g5, but we already spoke about this. The pawn on c3 is an unprotected pawn. All I need to do is hit him with bishop to b2. And in fact, not only am I winning this unprotected backward pawn, his knight is unprotected, so I will be attacking his knight, and moving his rook out the way will leave his pawn on a2 unprotected. Guy's in trouble. He's in trouble here. So he took on f6, does not change the price of rice because now I'm just going to take. He's in the same trouble. His rook is under attack. c3 is still under attack. And then he plays f5. So he's basically just agreeing to give me his rook. But what have I taught you guys? Do we take the rook? We could. But what should we do when we think we see a good move? We should look for a better move. If I take his rook, I'm going to be ahead by 2 points. However, what if I take on c3? I still attack his rook, I still attack the unprotected knight, and if he moves his rook to protect the knight, I hit him with rook takes a2, and I'm already ahead by 2 points. His knight is under attack, and if he moves the knight, he could lose his bishop on e2. And by the way, just so that you guys know how to do mathematics, I'm attacking 3 points and I'm attacking 5 points. If I get the option of taking both of them, I'm actually going to take the knight because the knight would be free. He moves his rook to d1 and he could be in trouble here. We already spoke about this. Let's just take the free pawn on a2. We're still ahead by 2 points. Pulling the knight back to b1 would have been the move, but he did not pull his knight back to b1. He decided to take a pawn and I'm attacking his knight on d2 twice. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to take the free knight. So let's start by taking the knight with the bishop. So that way, once my rook guards the bishop, I'm threatening to take on e3 with check, which means I will also win this bishop. This pawn is also going to die. But most importantly, now that we're in the endgame, what's the idea when you're in the endgame? Push the pass pawns. And my bishop on d2 is playing the perfect role to just escort the pawn to a queen. He decided to play rook takes pawn. He's grabbing some pawns off his own, but he really does not know what's about to hit him. So here's what I'm going to do. I could push, but there's no reason to not take on e3 before I push because now he's in check. I'm threatening the unprotected bishop. This is called a discovered attack. He had to find king to f1, which he didn't. So now his bishop is just hanging. Let's just take the free bishop. I am not afraid of pawn takes f7, by the way, because I'm just going to play king to e7 and he's not able to queen the pawn. Just like that, we're ahead by 7 points. So he decided to take with his rook. The guy just does not care what's happening. I guess he's trying to win this pawn, but I'm trying to go for his king now. I'm thinking of playing bishop to e4, but it's not going to be a checkmate. His knight guards the square, and I'm not seeing how I'm going to get rid of this knight. So I'm just going to push my pass pawn up the board. Let's just roll the pawn. The plan is to play c2 followed by c1, and then I'm also going to be winning this rook. So he plays rook to c7. As we said, he does not care. Okay, it looks like he's trying to threaten rook to c8 to skewer me, but that really doesn't work. For one, offense is the best defense. Well, I actually don't need to defend anything. I could just push the pawn. If he checks for one, I could just block. But I'm not going to block. I'm actually going to move my king because that basically means my rook is going to be attacking his rook and my pawn is going to be attacking his rook. So let's just push the pass pawn. It's over now. It's definitely over now. I will queen my pawn on the next move. So he gave a check again. We're not going to just block the check. I'm going to move the king. If he takes my rook, he gets mate. If he moves this rook, he loses this rook. And he's going to lose this rook because I'm just going to queen the pawn. So he took the rook, but that's just a checkmate. We're going to be doing the same thing against someone at the 1300 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1300 and we're going to be starting with e4. Ooh, this is the Scandinavian defense. Against this, we should always take the pawn, pull their queen out, then start developing to gain tempo on the queen. Now, queen a5 or queen to d8 is the ideal way to play. From here, I'm just going to play the move pawn to d4, controlling the center. And from here, I'm just going to be developing my pieces. He plays knight to f6, which is also developing. Let's go knight to f3. I have 2 out of 4 of my minor pieces developed. He develops his bishop. Okay, okay, let me develop my bishop as well. Now I have 3 out of 4 of my minor pieces developed. Then he plays h6. That's definitely an unnecessary pawn move. That was not needed. Maybe he wanted to prevent this, but that was not needed. Let me just continue with my development though. Let's just go bishop f4. Now we have 4 minor pieces developed, which means all I need to do is get my king out the center of the board and the attack will begin. And then he plays a6, another unnecessary pawn move. Yeah, this guy's playing too much pawn moves. And now I feel like I need to break some principles, but I won't do that. Let's play queen to e2. Now I can decide where I want to get castled. Do I want to castle on the king side? Do I want to castle on the queen side? So he plays e6. Looks like he's trying to develop his bishop and pin my knight. So if I castle, That may be something. Sometimes it's best to keep tension between castling so that way your opponent doesn't necessarily know where you're trying to get castled. Now, I would love to play a move like knight to e5, but then I'm gonna lose this pawn. In fact, let's just castle the king. This could actually get very interesting because if he plays bishop to b4 with the idea of taking my king is gonna be a bit weak, but his king is gonna be in the center of the board. He decided to play bishop to d6, and because my development is already complete, I'm going to start my attack. I'm in the middle game. He's still in the opening stage of the game. That's what you do when you move your queen more than once and make unnecessary pawn move. I'm not going to take because the take is a mistake. I'm going to hit him with knight to e5. Now, if he wants to give up his bishop for a knight, that's on him. My knight is on a very good square on his half of the board. And I saw the game that Magnus played against Levy, where he plays g4 followed by h4 followed by g5. If Magnus do it, I'm going to do it. So he plays queen to e7, decent move. I'm still not sure where this guy is going to get his king castle. Now, if I hit him with g4, he's going to take my knight. And if I take his bishop, he takes my bishop and I'm losing. And if I take his pawn, he takes my pawn and I'm also losing. So let's start by playing rook to g1. So that way, once we play g4, we do not lose any pawn. And this is how chess is played. You castle on one side and then you attack on the other side. I also want to play moves like d5 to open the center. He decided to play knight to c6. Definitely a weird move because I could take and double up his pawns. Actually, I can't. If I takes, I lose my bishop. So let's just continue with our attack. Pawn to g4, attacking his bishop. And then once the bishop moves, I may play g5 or I may just play h4 followed by g5. This is called a pawn storm, where you move your pawns forward so that way you open lines for your pieces and destroy the opponent's position. He pulls his bishop all the way back to h7. If I push, he takes, I takes, that's something. But let's go h4. This is a pawn storm. This is how the attack will begin. Pawn to g5 is coming. Castling on the king's side is just losing. And castling on the queen side is also losing. But then if he keeps his king in the center, he's also losing. What does that mean? Ooh, Nathan. He plays b5. That's an aggressive move. It could be a blunder though. Like if I take his unprotected knight because the pawn no longer guards it, he takes with check. What I'm thinking of, however, is to sack my knight on b5 because if the pawn takes and my bishop takes, then his knight is really dead. The only downside of this is his rook is able to take my pawn on e2, but then he's gonna lose his knight and I'm gonna win the game. So let's sacrifice the knight. I think this is just winning Nathan, but let's see what he does. One thing he could try is to trade on e5 first, but that also will not help him. Again, if you play unnecessary pawn moves, move your queen more than once in the opening, this is what happens. You're stuck in the opening. I'm already in the middle game. I'm already thinking of checkmate here. Oof. Ah, Nathan, man. Nathan Castle is king. It's like okay, here's what I'm thinking of. First of all, I want to play pawn to g5 so bad, and then after he takes, I hit him with g6, and then he's losing. I'm also trying to take a free knight on c6, but then if I takes the knight, he's gonna take my bishop with check. With that being said, though, why not just take on d6 first, playing an in-between move? If he takes with the pawn, that's just a free knight. If he takes with the queen, however, he puts his queen on the same line as my bishop, and I'm going to hit him with knight to g6, a discovered attack. Queen has to move, grab the rook, and we're winning the game. So let's take the knight on d6. If he takes with the queen, I could also just play pawn to g. I just want to play pawn to g5 so much, but I just know that this is the best move. So let's go knight to g6 here. If you notice, my bishop attacks the queen, the knight guards the bishop, the knight attacks the rook. This is called a discovered attack, where you move your knight out the way so that way it reveals the attack on the opponent's queen. Now he has to move his queen. Once the queen moves, we grab the rook, and that's more material. Queen to b4. A piece is on my half of the board. Let's be careful. The question is, do I need to take the rook just yet, or do I need to deal with the fact that the queen is on my half of the board? There's no immediate threat here. Let's just grab the rook. There's no immediate threat. I'm still going to hit him with pawn to g5 and continue with my pawn storm, and I will be ahead by about 3 points. So he decided to take with his king. That's a free pawn, by the way, but let's not be materialistic. It's time to go for the opponent's king. Again, there is no threats on my king, so no need to immediately deal with that queen. Now, I want to hit him with g5. The knight is definitely going to go to d5 though, but I'm ahead in material, so we're going to start trading pieces off the board. Let's hit him with g5. There is also knight to e4, which is losing actually, so I'm not afraid of that because all I'm going to do is remove the bishop that is guarding the knight and then just win the knight. Hmm. Knight to a5. A knight is on the edge of the board, but my bishop on c4 is under attack. Why? So if I grab the knight, he grabs my bishop, and I do not want that. Well, I grab the knight, he grabs my bishop, I take the pawn with check. I do not see what I gain from that though. That's the thing, that's the thing. Okay, fine. The knight attacks my bishop, let's just move the bishop all the way. I'm ahead by 3 points. So if he's trying to trade bishops, that's on him. A very aggressive move that he could try, however, is rook to b8, creating a battery on my b2 pawn. Like things could really get out of hand if I allow his queen to take, but that's very, very easy to defend. Okay, so Nathan decided to trade. Let's just take with the rook in this position, not with the pawn, because that will cause double pawns. His knight is still under attack. Rook to b8 again would be a nice idea, but I'm just gonna play b3. I think the best he should do here is move his knight away to d5. It attacks my bishop and it threatens a fork on d2. He did fine rook to b8, but let's just play pawn to b3. There's not a lot happening. He could give a check on a3, but then I'm just going to run away. I mean, if I go here, however, his knight could go to c4. I think I need to be careful here. So queen to a3 check. Okay, now I'm going to play the move king to d1. There's no more checks on my king. I am going to take his knight if he allows me to take the knight. And if he takes this pawn, thinking that he's going to be winning my rook, he's not. I'm just going to take the knight, and my bishop is going to be able to block the check. Nathan is playing aggressive. All of a sudden, knight d5 hits the bishop, threatening a fork. Knight could go here, knight could go here. Okay, offense is the best defense. Let's calm down. I have to move my bishop. I'm gonna move my bishop somewhere where it attacks something, especially since this queen is on my half of the board. So let's start by pulling the bishop all the way back to c1. That's fine. It attacks his queen, which means he has to react to this. And then I'm gonna take this pawn on h6. And if he does not take it back, I'm just going to push it and it's going to turn into a queen. He decided to take the pawn on a2. There is no threats in this position. He also only has 14 seconds on his clock. Let's just take the pawn on a6. If he decides to take, my bishop is going to take. Okay, now my bishop is able to take, which is a check. His king has to react to that move. And then once the king goes here, I'm thinking of playing moves like bishop to g5, checking his king. Okay, this check may not work. I mean, he's just going to move. He has no real attack on my position. I have passed pawn, so let me just push the pass pawn. He also only has 10 seconds on his clock. He moves his knight to b4. He is attacking my rook, but he's only attacking my rook. Again, I could give a check. I'm not really seeing what it does. So let's play the move rook to f3, attacking f7. If he checks me anytime on the background, I'm going to block the check. Now that he plays rook to d8, now bishop to g5 makes sense because the king and the rook is on the same line. And pushing the pawn to f6 does not help because I have two pieces covering the f6 square. So, okay, the question is, do I take with the pawn and then take the rook? Or do I take with the rook? Let's just take with the bishop with check. I want to be able to ensure that I'm able to block the check back here. So he moves the king. If I take his rook, then he's going to check me here. And then once I go here, his queen is going to take here and I could be in trouble. However, let's not think about that and just focus on attacking his king. Let's give a check on g7. The king has to move. He also only has 2 seconds on his clock. He moves his king to d6, but this is just a checkmate in two moves. I'm going to give a check on e5. The king has to go to c6 and queen. Okay, it's not mate actually. He is able to go to b5. But let's go for it. Queen to e5. The guy's going to lose on time. He moves his king here. That's not a checkmate. I could check here. The king goes here, but then that's gonna be a checkmate. So let's take with the rook. He's probably gonna lose on time. He did not lose on time. He only has zero point 0.3 seconds on the clock, but that's just a checkmate. What have we learned? Don't play the Scandinavian defense if you do not know exactly how it works because it breaks principles. Don't be making unnecessary pawn moves in the opening stage of the game. We're going to be doing the same thing against someone at the 1400 level. Stick around. Opponent is now 1400. Let's start by playing e4. And by the way, I'm thinking of doing more of these videos, but with like specific opening and specific color. Let me know if you guys want something like that. Against knight f, well, against e5, we're going to be playing knight f3. d6, already a slight mistake. We know we don't want to be blocking out our bishops like this. I'm just going to be continuing with my normal development here. I have two pieces developed. He developed his bishop though, not bad. Let me keep developing my pieces. Now I have three pieces developed. The goal is to get four pieces developed and the king castle. My opponent decided to play pawn c6. I will not necessarily call this an unnecessary pawn move because maybe he wants to play b5, but he's not developing. So what am I going to do? I'm going to hit him with d4. If you notice your opponent is like breaking principles, not trying to control the center of the board, what you should do is immediately charge in the center of the board. Let's just take on d4 in this position. I still have three pieces developed. My bishop is going to get very easily developed. And he plays knight to f6. Now, what I'm thinking here is, do I put my bishop on e3 or g5? And I'm not sure because I think he's going to sacrifice his knight. And then once I take, he plays d5. And that's very annoying. Another thing that I don't want to allow is pawn to b5 and attacking my bishop. So let's just start by pulling the bishop back to b3. Yes, I'm moving the bishop more than once. He got his king out the center of the board. Let me do the same, getting my king out the center of the board as well. I have one last piece that needs development, and then you guys will start seeing my attack coming up the board. So he developed his knight to d7, decent move. The knight is heading towards d5. I'm immediately thinking of a move like knight to f5 though, because the bishop no longer guards here. And I'm not sure because that's a bad bishop. I'm not interested into getting a bishop like that. So let's just finish our development. We have to play principled. I have four pieces developed. He has three pieces developed. My king is castled. His king is castled. His light squared bishop, however, is not yet developed. So I could still say I'm no longer in the opening stage of the game, and he's still in the opening stage of the game. It will be time to start my attack. Oh my lord. We're still seeing drawback blunders at 1400. Guys, remember, you're the one who's controlling your pieces. Before you move the piece, ask yourself, what was this pawn doing on b7, Mr. Alberto? That's his name, Alberto from Chile. The pawn was guarding the pawn on c6. Now that you play b5, it's no longer guarding the pawn on c6, Alberto. Now I'm just going to grab the pawn on c6, hit the queen and the bishop at the same time. Now you're forced to move the queen to e8, such a passive, ugly looking square, and I'm still not going to take this bad bishop. There's no more pawn on c6, which means the b5 pawn is now unprotected. So now I'm just going to take the pawn on b5. And just like that, I'm already ahead by two pawns, Mr. Alberto. And I'm threatening to play knight c7, which not only forks your queen and your rook, it traps your queen, Mr. Alberto. Okay, knight e5 makes some sense. What do we do here? So we want to fork. That's what we want to do. If I hit him with knight c7, then the queen takes my knight, and if I take his rook, he takes my other knight, and then obviously, the two knights are definitely better than the rook. I'm thinking of taking on e5 first, but then his queen is going to take on b5, and I'm not really seeing what my knight on e5 is doing. So what do we do here? Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take on e7 with check, and then once he takes back, I'm going to try to apply pressure to this pinned knight. So let's take on e7 with check. He has to react to that check by taking. I want you guys to notice how my bishop is now pinning this knight to the queen. And whenever we're pinning up, wait, that's a free pawn though, right? It's just a free pawn. I'm already ahead by 2 points. Why can't I just take a free pawn? Okay, if I takes rook over and I'm losing, I could takes, and then I'm ahead by what, 3 points? Yeah, that's definitely winning. I'm also thinking of f4 hitting the knight. Knight back to c3 is what I really want to play, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie. But then he has bishop to e6, and then I hit him with f4, and then the knight moved, then I hit him with f5, and then the bishop moved, then I apply pressure to the pin knight. So there's a lot of move that is winning here. Like the simplest way to win this is actually to just get the queens off the board. I'm gonna be ahead by 3 points and I'm winning the game. But pulling the knight back to c3 threatens to apply pressure to the pin knight, and if he allows me to apply pressure to his pin knight, it's going to be GG's, which he did. He plays bishop to a6, attacking my rook. The move that I'm about to play is called danger levels. Yes, he's attacking my 5 points, but because I'm able to attack something that is greater than 5 points, we're not going to move for 5 points. Plus, offense is the best defense. Plus, the best moves are on the opponent's half of the board. PP on the PP. The queen now has to move, and yet checkmate has to come. With a king exposed like this, checkmate has to come. He pulls his queen back to d8. How do we continue here? So how am I going to do this? I could take with the bishop. I could take with the knight. My rook is under attack. Taking with the knight is a check. If he takes, I counter attack his rook. And if he takes my rook, I do not take back. Nah, that's too risky. That's too risky. The thing is, if I move my rook, he plays knight d7. And if bishop a4 trying to hit the knight, he plays h6. That's my issue. That's my issue. Okay. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take it with the bishop. I'm just going to take it with the bishop, attacking the queen. It's very important that I expose his king. So now that his king is exposed, I could just move my rook out the way. I'm also thinking of playing a move like f4, and if he takes my rook, I take his knight, and then I'm attacking this. Yeah, let's hit him with f4. f4 is a nice move, because if he thinks he's getting material by taking my rook, I'm not going to take back the bishop. I'm going to take his knight, and his bishop on f1 is still going to be under attack. And if he decides to move away the bishop, my knight takes on f6 with check, and then once he moves the king, queen h5 will lead to a checkmate. So the best he could do in this position is just to move his knight out the way, and then I'll probably just move my rook out the way, and then I'm just going to be chilling with 2 extra points and my opponent having an exposed king. Okay, he did not take the rook. He decided to pull his knight back, and okay, oh my, I'm not going to guard the rook again. I'm not going to guard the rook. I don't want the rook. I want his king. I want this f7 pawn. Okay, let's leave the rook hanging again, and I'm going to play the move queen to d4. Queen to d4 is a threat. And again, how do we find these types of moves? Our evaluation skills has to be on point. We have to be able to notice that the f6 pawn is under attack once and he's guarding it once, and we need to apply more pressure to the f6 pawn. We need to be able to see that his king is weak. He decided to take the rook, and I guess this is going to be GG's. Now, what I'm about to do is called an in-between move. I'm not going to just take the bishop. I'm going to take on f6 with check. Now, if he moves his king, then I should be able to do a discovered check, then take the bishop. He could also be checkmated here if he's not careful. So let's take on f6 with check. He has to put his king on the same line as my queen. Now I want to play knight to h5 check. The thing is with knight to h5 though, is if I play knight to h5 check, he is able to block the check with the pawn, and then not 100% sure what my knight is doing on h5. So let's not rush. Let's just take the bishop. Now I'm only ahead by 1 point, but this is just GG's. I can always play knight to d7 if I'm trying to win a rook, but the king is really what I'm going for. For example, if a rook is on h7, that's going to be a mate. So I'm already thinking of rook lift ideas. For example, rook f3, rook h3. Queen to b6 is not a bad move though. Yeah, queen to b6. That's not a bad move because now I'm only ahead by 1 point and he trades the queens off the board. That was a good move, Alberta. That was definitely a good move. Okay, we're gonna have to demonstrate some endgame class here. Let's play pawn to c3. For some reason, I only have 1 minute and 42 seconds on my clock, so I also have to play a bit fast. But okay, king to g7 was played. He is attacking my knight. I have no intentions of moving the knight. Let's play pawn to e5. If he takes the pawn, then I'm just going to take back, and then I will have a pass pawn in the end game. So let's just take. Now we have a pass pawn. The d pawn is passed. The plan from here is just to push the pawn up the board. Rook to d1 was played, attacking the pawn, which is unprotected. but let's just go rook to d1. I mean, rooks belong behind the pass pawn anyways. And because we're in the end game, the goal is to activate the king. Now, knight to f4 is a good try. He wants to play knight to e2 and win this pawn. Let's go king to f2. It's very important that we activate our king. And even though he has the two rooks, and I have the two minor pieces, the two minor pieces will always be better than the rook. And I have like a bunch of pawns more than him. So he plays f4, not sure what that does. The knight is obviously on my half of the board. Let's go king to f3. We're just continuing to activating our king, chasing that knight out of our half of the board. He could play knight e6, which he didn't. He chose to put the knight back on g6. But what do we do here? We're just gonna activate our king. Now my king becomes one of the main fighting piece in the game, while his king is just in the corner, not really doing much. The goal from here is to start pushing my pass pawn. As we spoke about, in the end game, pass pawns must be pushed. So he pulls his knight back. What does that do? Not really sure. Okay, my time is also running out. Let's play rook to d3 here. Pushing the pass pawn is by far completely winning, but I'm also thinking of playing moves like rook to g6, checking the king, and then just trying to checkmate him on h7. He decided to play knight c6. Let's give a check. The king has to move. He is now attacking my d4 pawn twice. So once he moves the king, I'm going to play the move pawn to d5, hit the knight, forcing the knight to move. Then I'm going to attack his pawn on h7. Knight there doesn't threaten anything. Rook h3 hits the pawn on h7. We have to be a bit fast in this position. I'm assuming he's going to play the move king to g7. So once I take the king runs to g6, and I'm not seeing the checkmate, but at that point, I'm just going to chase his knight. Okay, so the king moved. Let's chase the knight first. We're not in any rush to take this pawn just yet. We're gonna take the pawn once he moves the knight, and his king is definitely in a mating net. I do not have enough time. Let's take the pawn. I do not have enough time to. Okay, this should be a mate. King to f4 should lead to a mate. King has no squares. How is he going to prevent bishop to c2? This is called a mating net. He moves his knight to c5, attacking my bishop. The only reason why this move is not a checkmate is because his knight is able to block. So once he blocks with the knight, Mr. Alberto, he blocks with the knight, but that's just a checkmate. What have we learned? The drawback mistake happens most often at the intermediate level. Before you move your piece, check to see what the piece was doing. We're about to do the same thing against someone at the 1500 level. Stick around. Now our opponent is in the 1500 region. We're still going to be doing the same thing. Let's start this off one by playing e4. No, we're playing against a Scandinavian defense. I'm always going to recommend you guys to just take the pawn, and you basically want to pull out the opponent's queen. And once their queen takes, you simply develop your knight so that way you gain tempo on the queen. Now, queen to a5 is the best square for the queen, but from here, all we're going to be doing is developing our pieces. We're going to start by playing pawn to d4 though, just because it controls the center of the board. And after this knight to f6 move, we just play knight to f3. Now we have two pieces developed. The goal is to develop four of our minor pieces and get to our king castle. Now, believe it or not, bishop to g4 is actually a mistake. It's usually best to put the bishop on f5 because now I'm able to play h3 and I'm just chasing away the bishop. And then obviously giving up a bishop for a knight is already a deficit for black. So if he takes my knight, I'm just going to take the queen, hit this pawn. And if he pulls the bishop back to h4, I'm going to force him to move the bishop again. My opponent plays the move queen to h5. That's a very bold move. Queen to h5 is actually a blunder. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I could just take this bishop. Now, queen to h5 was played because my rook is obviously unprotected. But look on what's about to hit him. I'm gonna take the bishop anyways. No, it seems weird, right? Yes, it seems weird. But I just captured the guy's bishop. He just took my rook. But his queen now has no squares to go. With that being said, I'm gonna start my attack. How am I gonna start my attack? I'm gonna start by hitting him with pawn to g5. I'm now attacking his knight. I'm forcing his knight to move out of the way. Now, obviously, this is a very risky move. I have to be careful. I just sacrificed the rook for this. But again, his queen is just not in the game. I'm just going to play the game, assuming that his queen is not doing anything. Knight to g4 was played. Decent move. He's putting his knight on my half of the board. He's targeting h2. Knight to h2 could come. But now I'm going to start my attack with the whole idea of trying to win his rook. Now, what I'm seeing here is knight to d5, which would threaten a fork here. If I play knight to d5, knight to h2 could be played, and it threatens mate here. And then if I takes, he goes queen takes, but then bishop to f4 wins the game. So let's go knight to d5. I'm now threatening a fork on c7. Knight to a6 does not defend the fork. So if he's trying to not lose his c7 pawn, then the best he could do is move his king. And if you have to be moving your king this early on in the game, then you messed up somewhere. Okay, the opponent played knight to a6. Knight to a6 is actually possible. I miscalculated because my bishop is pinned. I'm actually not able to take the bishop, it's pinned. And he's gonna castle his king on the next move. Okay, what am I gonna do here? Okay, I need to act fast here. Here I need to act fast. So here's what I'm gonna do. Queen to d3. Reset move. If the opponent decide to castle in this position, then he may lose his knight because the knight is unprotected on g4. So there is queen to f5. And the other threat with queen to d3 is I'm trying to play queen to b5, which checks his king and win this pawn. And then the other idea is I want to quickly develop my bishop so that way I could finally castle my king and play against the fact that his queen is misplaced. So e6 was played. It did chase out my knight. I think he missed the fact that queen to b5 checks the king and attack this pawn, which will be attacking his rook. It's not a crazy game because I miscalculated bishop a6, but queen to b5 check has to be nice. We spoke about this. We're looking for moves that we can play on the opponent's half of the board. A check is a forcing move. Yes, he's able to play pawn to c6, which would be a fork, but I'm going to take here and attack his rook. And then he's able to play rook to b8 and attack my queen, but then I take on c6 with check. It's a crazy game. Let's see what he does. He decided to play c6. He's forking my queen and my knight. In fact, there's just two pieces attacking my knight. But I already saw this. The goal is to take the unprotected pawn. Now his knight is unprotected. His rook is unprotected. I am not threatening any checkmates, but I am threatening the knight. But secretly, I'm just trying to get my king castle. I want to go bishop f4 and castle as quickly as I possibly can. And I'm attacking this weak pawn that I'm gonna be taking with a check. So he decided to move his rook to d8. We could say that makes some sense. I mean, I could grab the knight, but he's going to grab my knight. And I'm definitely going to take on c6 first with check. It's the most forcing move in the position. He has to react to it. Let's take on c7 with check. The only thing he could do here actually is to block with the rook. Now, I'm trying to see what I could do from a material perspective. They're saying that the position is equal because I have so many pawns. If I could just develop this bishop, that would just be good, but it's pinned. I think the best I could do here is prioritize my development. So let's just go ahead and take this knight. It is saying that I'm ahead by 3 points, but I am assuming he's going to take my knight. And once he takes my knight, I mean, the guy's king is not safe. But I can't check him with the bishop. If I'm able to check him with the bishop, it will lead to a checkmate. So my ultimate goal in this position is to break this pin. Okay, he took with the rook. That's a bit weird. That's a bit weird. Now, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start by checking him on c6, so that way, one, if he moves his king stays in the center. But two, if he blocks with the rook, it allows me to play knight e5 in some variations. I can't do it now, the knight guards the square. But in addition to that, he's also won't be able to get castle. So for example, if he develops his bishop and try to get castle, my queen is just gonna take his rook. So he decided to block with the rook, and all I need to do is figure out my castle. Where do I put this bishop? Let's put the bishop on f4. I am going to castle on the next move. If I manage to castle on the next move, his queen is still not in the game. I want you guys to notice that. The queen is not in the game. So when you see someone is trying to be too materialistic, bringing up the queen too early, this is what could come their way. Okay, so he develops his bishop. We spoke about this. Castling will always be impossible unless he wants to lose a rook. So let's just castle the king in this position. Knight takes f2 is something. Knight takes f2 is something actually. I think I'm gonna be forced to move my rook. Let's see what happens here. That's a tricky move. This is called a drawback mistake, by the way. If you notice, my king was guarding f2. Me castling my king, it's no longer guarding f2. If knight takes f2, I'm thinking of sacking my queen. Okay, never mind. Knight takes f2 is bad. I'm just gonna go knight e5, apply pressure to his rook. I'm talking about okay, but then he just castles. This is a weird position. Let's see. So he did play knight takes f2. Things are about to get very weird. If I play knight to e5, he's going to castle the king. And then if I take his rook, he's going to take my rook. And then my bishop is going to be hanging. I do not want to lose my rook. With that being said, before I do anything, I'm just going to move the rook. That's fine. Let's just move the rook. My knight still guards my rook, which means I'm still threatening to play bishop to b5, which means it's going to be a discovered attack. My rook attacks the queen. My bishop threatens his rook. Still, if he castles here, I'm going to grab the rook and I'm ahead by a rook. So rook to e1 is definitely the move. So he moves his queen out the way, and I'm about to win his rook, basically. Now, knight to e5 applies pressure to the rook. Bishop to b5 also applies pressure to the rook. In either way, he's going to castle his king on the next move. I'm about to win a rook, but I also wanted to find a way to keep his king in the center of the board, which is not possible, but getting an extra rook is fine. So let's go bishop to b5. The best he could do here is just castle, and then I'll take the rook. If you notice, the rook is pinned, and what I'm doing in this position is just applying pressure to the pin piece, basically. Whenever you have a piece pinned, you definitely want to apply pressure to it. And I want you guys to notice, all I'm trying to do is keep his king in the center of the board, but he is able to get castled, but he's going to be losing his rook castling. So it's GG's from here. Yeah, he castle is king. Let's grab the rook. Now we're hitting the bishop. From here, we're ahead by an entire, well, it's not an entire rook because I have one rook, he has one rook, but I have three pieces, he has two pieces, and I have good amount of pawns. So he moves his bishop out of the way. He is attacking my rook. Doesn't really do much. All I'm going to do here is play pawn c3, chase away the bishop. Bishop has to move. There is no fork here, by the way, because my bishop guards the square. So he moves the bishop. From here, I have a very nice idea, and that is pawn to d5. I'm just trying to open the position as best as I can. For example, if he takes on d5, it allows my rook to get access to his background. So I could either play rook to e8, which may lead to a checkmate, or him losing the rook, or I could try to set up a queen sacrifice, which would also lead to a checkmate. So taking the pawn here is bad. Rook to d8 was played. Very interesting decision. It's attacking my queen. Am I able to sacrifice my rook? Because if his rook takes, that's mate. He is able to play pawn takes though, so that doesn't work. Well, I'm just winning in all variation. Look at this. The knight is an unprotected piece. The bishop is an unprotected piece. Once I play queen takes a7, I'm attacking two unprotected pieces at the same time. This is called a fork. So he's now forced to lose one of his pieces, and I'm ahead by 5 points. Okay, queen to g4 is a good try. Queen to g4 is a good try because he's attacking my bishop, which means if I go ahead and take one of his pieces, he's going to take my bishop. The issue is though, his pieces are still being forked. So all I need to do here is just move my bishop somewhere where it's safe. For example, bishop to d2. My bishop is now safe. All my pieces are protected except this bishop, but he will still lose one of his pieces. He took on g2, attacking my unprotected knight, but now I'm able to take on a5, and that's because his rook on d8 is unprotected. And if he dares to touch my knight, he's going to lose his rook to a checkmate. Now we're ahead by 7 points of material. He moves his rook out the way, but he only had 30 seconds on his clock, so we were expecting some blunders. I'm just gonna grab the rook. Now we're ahead by 12 points. I'm not afraid of this little knight check. Like, I don't mind if I lose 6 points here. I just have too many material. So he gave a check. I just need to move the king. That's fine. If he takes my rook, I just take with the knight, hit the queen. Now we're ahead by 10 points. Maybe he doesn't know where the resign button is, but he only has 10 seconds on his clock, and he's also trading queen. So let's just take the queen here. Now I'm ahead by three pieces. He has 12 seconds on his clock. Let's just queen the pass pawn. That's all I'm going to do now. Well, he finally resigned. What have we learned? Moving the queen so many times in the opening stage of the game has to be a bad idea, even if you win some material. We're not going to be doing the same thing, but against someone at the 1600 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1600 level. Let's hit him with e4. And as I'm saying, I want to do a lot more videos like these with specific opening, specific color. You tell me, I'll do it. He plays d5. This is the Scandinavian defense. We take the pawn. We pull that queen out. He did not pull out the queen. He decided to play knight to f6. This is actually the preferred way to play. And usually when they do it like this, I just develop my knight to c3. Like, this is just the most normal, regular development. He took on d5. Now, obviously, we're not going to take because then his queen comes out and I do not have any minor piece to attack the queen. So instead, what I'm going to do is just develop my bishop. Now I have two of my pieces developed. We need to develop two more pieces. We need to castle the king. Then we're going to be attacking this Brazilian guy. So he plays c6. Makes some sense. He's just trying to guard his knight. I mean, I could just develop my knight to f3, to be honest. Yeah, actually, or I could play d4. No, I'm actually gonna play queen to f3. Yes, I'm developing my queen a bit too early, but my whole idea is to get him to move the knight more than once. And he shouldn't move the knight, by the way. If he plays pawn to e6, then I get him to block in his light squared bishop. And then I'm just gonna continue with my development normally. And there's no minor pieces that is able to attack my queen. So my queen is gonna be very active on f3. So he plays e6, blocking in the bishop. That's what I wanted. Now I'm just gonna develop my knight to d2. Now we have three pieces developed. My queen is in a good spot. I'm gonna play moves like d4, develop my bishop to d2, and then I'm gonna choose where I want to castle based on the position. So he plays bishop to d6. Decent move. Let's play d4 here, controlling the center of the board. Looks like he's planning on castling on the king side. With that being said, I may just castle on the queen side so that way it's an aggressive, crazy game. Who knows? Knight to d7. It's a decent move. It's a decent move. He could also play e5 sometime in the future. There's no good squares for my dark squared bishop. So I'm just going to put it on d2 here. Now I'm going to decide where I'm going to get my king. Castle could be on the queen side, could be on the king side. It all depends on what he does. So he plays knight to b6. He's attacking my bishop. What I'm going to do here is I have to move the bishop. I don't want the bishop to take my knight. I'm going to move my... this is actually weird. I'm going to move my bishop to d3 here, pointing my bishop towards his h7 pawn. Now, if he castles on the king side, then I know exactly where my attack is going to be coming from. A very interesting move that black have in this position is knight to b4. And, it would basically mean he's trying to gain the bishop pair early. So he plays queen to c7. Now, I do not want him to play knight to b4. So I'm actually going to play the move knight to e4. It attacks his bishop and it kind of prevents him from playing knight to b4. It doesn't really prevent him from playing knight to b4 because his bishop still guards the square. Probably I should have played a3. Well, let's see. So he decided to develop his bishop instead. He wants to be very principled, and we're definitely not going to be allowing knight to b4 here. So we're going to play the move pawn to a3. Now, because I'm going to play moves like pawn to a3, I also want to play moves like pawn to c4, attack the knight, force the knight to move, hit him with c5, forking the knight and the bishop. I may just castle my king on the king side because usually when you're playing, you do not want to necessarily castle your king on the side where you're going to be moving up all the pawns. Like, it's not losing, but things could get very complicated. Wait, did I just not win a piece? I could have played c4 and win a piece because his knight still goes okay. He castles, so I'm still able to do it, but I'm actually mad that I missed it because, okay, it's the same thing. I'm going to play pawn to c4, right? And what I'm seeing is the fact that his knight and his bishop is sitting adjacent to each other. So you should be thinking about a pawn moving to c5. Now, the tactical term for this is called marching pawns. So the whole idea goes like this. You move the pawn to c4, and attack this knight. If he sees the fork coming and move his knight or his bishop, we take the knight for free. However, if he's like, okay, he's attacking my knight, let me move my knight out the way, then I'm going to play pawn to c5, forking his bishop and his knight, and I will still be winning material. He also castled his king, leaving his f7 pawn unprotected. So things are not going very well for my friend from Brazil. So he decided to pull the knight back to f6. Now, I could take the bishop, then fork. It will really will not make a difference. Or I could just play pawn to c5 and fork. This is called a fork. You know, one piece attack more than one pieces at the same time. If he moves his bishop out the way, then he would have been in big trouble. Now, he decided to take with his knight, which is fine. Like, I could take this first and then take the knight, but his pieces are going to be forked anyways. So all I'm gonna do is just take back the knight. He still has to move away one of these pieces, which means he will still lose material. So he decided to sacrifice the bishop. Let's just take on c5. His knight is now under attack, which has to move out the way, and not just ahead by a piece. The goal is to start trading pieces off the board. I like the idea of taking the knight and then playing bishop to f4, but he could take with the c pawn and then play e5. That looks like a free pawn, but let's not get too greedy. My king is in the center of the board. Let's get the king out the center of the board. Taking the knight will always be a fine move, by the way, because I am ahead in material. And once you're ahead in material, all the trade start making sense. And just a tip to leave with you guys, if you're ahead in material, trade pieces, not pawns. So he plays f5. He's basically forcing me to trade. So I am going to do it. Let's just take the knight. And keep in mind, taking with the e-pawn could put his queen in some issues. He did take with the e-pawn. Look at this. Bishop to f4. The queen has to go to a5. Pawn to b4. Okay, how do I trap this queen though? I'm not gonna lie. I want to play pawn to b4 and just threaten to trap the queen. Remember what I tell you guys about the threat being better than the execution? This has to be an example. So immediate bishop to f4 is good. Keep that in mind. Queen has to go here. I push. Maybe the queen goes back and I just centralize my knight. But let's just play pawn to b4. Let's control the square, the only square that his queen could move to. So, for example, if he moves any of these pieces, his queen is going to get trapped. He has to move something on the queen side so that way when I put my bishop on f4 or pawn to g5, so that way he does not allow bishop to f4. But pawn to g5 does not help, my friend, because now I'm just going to take and I'm attacking this rook. The good thing is he is forced to move the rook, and I basically helped him because now if I go here, he's going to pull his queen back to d8. With that being said, that's no longer the idea. I want you guys to notice how this rook on h8 has nowhere to go, and it's on a dark square. So what I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to hit him with bishop to f6, pointing towards the rook. Now the rook is trapped. That rook has nowhere to go. I'm just going to take the rook on the next move. And because I'm already ahead by 3 points, I'm going to be ahead by an entire rook. With that being said, I'm definitely going to be trading every single chance I get. So he plays a5, he wants to move the rook. Let's simply take, and then he took with his rook. Now, I need to get as much pieces in the game. Let's go knight to d4 here, centralizing the knight. I have 2 pieces attacking this pawn. My rooks are really not doing anything. If I could double up my rooks on the e file, then that would be simply winning. He plays queen to e5, attacking my knight. Let's just play rook to d1, guarding the knight. Then the plan from here is to play rook to e1, attack the queen, force the queen off the open file, and then continue with my plan. So he plays f5. I know what is coming. The guy has a light squared bishop. My queen and my rook is on the same line, so I have to be aware of a bishop coming to g4. But I do not necessarily have to defend against it right now because I'm going to play the move rook to e1 first, attacking his queen, forcing his queen to react to my move. Now that he moves his queen out the way, I need to defend against this. But remember, offense is the best defense. So instead of doing something like pawn to h3, prevent the bishop from going to g4, I'm just going to play knight to e6. I block the bishop from going to g4. My knight attacks the queen, which means if he trades, I'm happy with a trade. And if he moves his queen, he will be losing his f4 pawn. He moves his queen to f5. pretty interesting decision because if I play queen takes, he has bishop takes, and that wins some material. And my knight is under attack. I mean, that's fine though. Still a free pawn. Let's just take the pawn. Like, he really has nothing in this position. Like, especially if I manage to trade only one more piece off the board, then it's going to be over. He really has nothing. Now, he pulls his queen back to f7, and already I have a tactic that wins even more material. Look on this. I'm going to play the move knight takes d5 because I want to trade the queens off the board. Obviously, the queen is unprotected because this is a discovered attack. So if he takes my knight, I take his queen. But if his queen takes my queen, I'm going to play what is called an in-between move. Knight to e7. Check. First, I'm going to check his king. And then once he moves, then I'm going to take back the queen. Then I successfully trade the queens off the board. I'm going to be ahead by 7 points. And it's just going to be game over. So let's take on d5 here. He doesn't have to trade. But if he does not trade, then I'm just going to check on e7. He traded the queens. Now we play the in-between move, forcing the opponent's king to move. And then now that the king moved, then I'm going to take the queen. Now I'm ahead by 7 points. I have the extra rook. I just need to trade one more pair of rooks off the board. And the guy has 30 seconds on the clock. And my opponent resigns. We're going to be doing the same thing against someone at the 1700 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1700. We're still going to be doing the same thing. Let's start with e4. Then he plays e5. I'll develop my knight, hit the pawn. He guards it, and we're going to be playing some Italian game. So he's playing the two knights defense. We're not going to be going for the fried liver attack here. I'm just going to play pawn to d3, guarding the center. Bishop to c5 here would be a very nice move. But then he plays h6. Usually h6 is not needed that early, but still perfectly playable move. Let's just castle the king here. My king is castled. I have two more pieces that need development. He develops his bishop to e7, and here I'm going to play the very slow maneuvering version where I'm going to play c3. So when I'm playing against high rated players, I usually play this c3 idea, and the whole plan here is to outmaneuver my opponent, basically. So if you're able to understand this idea, then you should be winning some games. Now, he plays a6. He could play b5 and attack the bishop, but then I'll just go back. So here I'm just going to play the move rook to e1. The plan is to get my knight from d2 to f1 to g3 or e3. So he plays b5. Let's just go back here. The plan is to play d4, get this knight in the game. Usually the dark squared bishop is developed last. He castles. Let's go knight to d2 here. He plays d3. Let's go knight f1. The plan is to go knight to g3. And usually bishop to g4 is a mistake in these types of position, even though the knight is pinned to the queen. And that's because I'm able to play h3. And obviously, if you take the knight, I'm just going to take back. But this is why. Now once the bishop goes back to h5, the same knight is able to come to g3 and attack the bishop. And keep in mind, if I'm able to take the opponent's bishop, I'm going to have a slight advantage because these are the small advantage that we try to fight for in these types of positions. He pulls the bishop back to g6, and then the idea to trap the bishop here is knight to h4. Now, whenever you're going to be putting a knight on h4, always have a look on this diagonal. You don't want the opponent to like sacrifice their knight, and then once they take your knight and you're down by a pawn. So if any knight takes e4 is played here, I'm going to just play knight takes g6, and that's a free bishop because the pawn on f7 is actually not guarding the bishop. So the best he could do here is, okay, d5 makes some sense, but look on this diagonal. My bishop is on the same diagonal as his king, and he's gonna allow me to take his bishop, and then I can start attacking along this diagonal. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take on d5. We're opening the center of the board. I'm the one with the bishops, and usually when you have the bishop, you want to ensure that you open the center. So he took with his knight. Yes, my knight is under attack, but now I'll take his bishop. And he's able to take my knight, but this knight is in a very, very annoying pin. And he has this unprotected pawn on g6. From here, I want to start an attack. I'm going to play the move queen to g4. It attacks the unprotected pawn. It applies some pressure to this e6 square, because if I manage to check, then I win the game. And in some lines, I could sacrifice my bishop on h6. I still need to be a bit careful though, because my bishop is not really developed. He moved his king. So basically, he took his king off this diagonal and he's protecting the pawn. So that's not a bad move. But I have a very nice idea in this position. Now, I think there are two weaknesses here. There's the unprotected knight on c6, and there's this knight on d5 that I'm applying pressure to it, and the queen is guarding. So if I play the move queen to e4, I'm attacking this knight two times. He's only guarding it once. The question is, how is he going to add additional defense to the knight where he pulls the knight back to f6, but it leaves this knight unprotected? So now we take the knight on c6, and just like that, we're ahead by a piece. So he took on d3. That's a free pawn. I would love to get my bishop on this diagonal, seeing that it hits the queen and points towards his king. But I also need to ensure that I finish my development. So I'm not going to try to grab any free pawn. I'm just going to develop my bishop. And then I want to get my rook, my last piece in the game, hitting the queen. I'm ahead by a piece. I don't necessarily have to do too much right here. He pulls his queen back, guarding his pawn. Now I'll swing my last piece in the game. If you guys look on this position, I want you to notice how every single piece that I have is doing something. Moves his queen to c8. Okay, I was attacking the queen. He moves it. I'm thinking of bishop e6, but he's just going to move his queen again. I want to find ways to target his king, and I'm seeing the idea of pulling my bishop back to c2. It puts my bishop on the same line as his king, and this pawn on g6 is weak. So if I can apply pressure to this pin pawn, I could win that pawn, and this could lead to a checkmate. He plays bishop to e7. Now I'm going to play knight to e4. I'm ahead by a piece, so the ultimate goal is to trade as much pieces off the board. So if the knight takes, I could take with my bishop, apply pressure to his rook, or I could take with my queen and apply pressure to g6. They're both decent moves. He moves his queen to d7, which is very bad move, because look on the position. Like, I'm attacking his queen. The queen is being guarded by the knight. Like, what do you get from that? The queen is being guarded by the knight. If you're attacking something and the opponent guards it, you should be thinking of removing the guard, especially since this is a check. And remember what we said about finding the best move on the chessboard? You look for moves on the opponent's half of the board. These moves are usually checks, captures, threats. So once I play knight takes f6 check, it's a removing the guard tactic. He has to react to the check by taking the knight, and my opponent resigns. What have we learned? It's usually best to develop our pieces than to play pawn moves like h6. Whenever there's unprotected pieces on the board, that's when you should be looking for tactics. We're going to be doing the same thing against 800 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now in the 800 region. Let's start by hitting him with e4. And then he's playing the French defense. This is a very interesting opening. Let's play d4 here. Now, after d5, there's many ways to play against the French. I'm going to choose to play the advanced variation of the French defense. It prevents the opponent's knight from coming out, and it keeps his light squared bishop back. Now, c5, he's basically trying to target my d4 pawn. Here, I'm going to play pawn to c3, just guarding the pawn. And then he plays knight to c6. So basically what he's doing here is just attacking the d4 pawn with all his pieces. Let's go knight to f3, guarding the pawn. And then queen to b6. As you guys are noticing, in the French defense, also the Caracan, the d4 pawn could be a very weak target. Now, what I like to do when I play against these lines is just to play a move like bishop to d3, allowing black to capture the free pawn on d4, because it's going to be too weak. It's best to sacrifice the pawn so that way you could gain some tempo. He develops his bishop to d7, and here I'm just going to castle my king, just getting my king out the center of the board. The pawn on d4 is hanging. He took the pawn. Let's just take back the pawn. And then my whole idea here, playing against the French defense, is my king is castled. His king is still in the center of the board. The goal is to open the center of the board and start an attack. However, the French defense is one of the hardest lines to play against. So let's see. Let's take. Once his queen takes, we could say he is developing his queen or moving his queen too much times. From here, I'm going to actually not protect my pawn on e5 and just play the move knight to c3, just developing my pieces. Now, queen takes e5 is actually not good. It allows rook to e1 with tempo, and he's basically helping me to open the center, and that's what I'm trying to do. And being 1846, I'm not expecting him to do this. Now, the threat of playing knight c3 is to play knight to b5, putting the first piece on his half of the board, starting my attack. The main move in this position, because I'm a French expert, is to play pawn to a6. So he did play pawn to a6, preventing my knight from going to the b5 square. And usually in this position, all I'm trying to do from here is just develop. There's moves like queen to e2, there's moves like king to h1, trying to play f4. Let's start by playing queen to e2 here. I could also play rook to d1, putting my rook on the same line as the queen, but the more aggressive way to play it is to try to play moves like f4 and f5, because remember what we said about planning. Planning has a lot to do with pawn breaks and pawn storms, and you can't really start a successful attack if you do not open enough lines for your pieces. So that's what my plan is here. So he develops his knight to e7, good move. The idea from here is actually to play knight c6, followed by knight b4, and then followed by queen c4. If he plays all of these moves, then he knows exactly how to refute this line. Now, I want to be able to play f4. I can't play f4 with the queen on d4, so I have to move my king to h1 first, and then all he needs to do here is play knight c6, attack my pawn, force me to guard the pawn, play knight b4, attack the bishop, force me to move the bishop, then play queen c4, force the queens off the board, and then he's going to be ahead by a pawn. But he did not find that idea. He decided to put his knight on the g6 square instead, which is not really ideal for a knight in the French defense, because now I'm going to play pawn to f4. In the future, I can always play moves like pawn to f5, which will attack the knight, and it will help me to open the position. And another thing he needs to keep in mind is I would love to trap this queen. So bishop to c5, I'm actually not able to play a move like bishop to e3 here because he has so much control over this. But I'm thinking of a move like just pawn to a3, followed by bishop to d2, pawn to b4, just starting my attack. Everything is safe for me in this position. Now, pawn to a3 makes a lot of sense. So let's play pawn to a3. I am not able to play b4 just yet because I will lose my knight. So I'm going to play moves like bishop to d2, just ensuring that I keep my knight guarded. He decided to castle his king. Let's develop our last piece. And I am also thinking of starting an attack on his king. I want you guys to keep in mind, I am down a pawn. And the compensation that I have is just the space on the king side. If he plays this line very carefully, he could come out on top. Now, I want you guys to look on this queen. The queen actually has nowhere to go. However, I have no way to trap the queen. But let's see how he continues. So rook to c8 was played. Rook needs file, so he's doing well. Pawn to b4 hits the bishop. He's just going to pull the bishop back, and then my knight is going to be under attack. I don't want to allow that. Now, what I would love to do here is hit him with rook to f3. Because if I hit him with rook to f3, then bishop to e3 could trap his queen. And I'm threatening ideas like rook to h3. This is called a rook lift. And I could play moves like queen to h5 and start an attack on his king. Okay, let's go rook to f3. Rook to f3 is definitely the start of an attack. If he does not react to this the right way, he's going to be in trouble. Not going to lie though, he got all his pieces out very quickly. He has no bad pieces except this light squared bishop. He needs to figure out what this light squared bishop is doing. And he also needs to figure out how am I going to prevent a move like bishop to e3, which will trap my queen. So he decided to play knight to h4, and I think I definitely have an advantage in this scenario. First of all, why not hit him with bishop to e3 and trap the queen? He's gonna take my rook, and then once he takes my rook, I take his queen, and then his knight takes my queen. He gets two pieces for the rook. For the queen, which is an advantage for me, but I want more. Can I get more? What if I sacrifice my bishop? It's a check. Whenever you're trying to find the best move, look for moves on the opponent's half of the board. And a check is the most forcing move that you could play in chess. So what if I start with a check? If I start with a check and the king takes, now I hit him with rook to h3, pinning the knight to the king. And I'm just going to take the knight on the next move. Maybe he could try queen to f2, guard the knight, threaten to trade the queens. But then I go queen to h5 check. And once the king moves, then I grab my knight. He's not going to be getting checkmated though, but it should be a decent position for me. This is weird. Do I want the queen or do I want the attack? Okay, yeah, this is gonna be a crazy game. Like, I want to play bishop to h7, but I don't like the idea. So let's just trap his queen. Let's go bishop to e3, and I'm basically gonna be losing a rook and a bishop. So I'm not winning here. Like, I have the queen. It does not mean I'm completely winning. So I still need to ensure that I play some chess in this position. My queen is under attack. Let's play queen to h5. It's the most forcing move in the position. It's also threatening a checkmate, so he has to react to that. Yo, this guy is 1846 and is falling for mating once. That's a checkmate, Bunjili. What have we learned? In the opening stage of the game, don't try to grab three pawns and moving the same pieces more than once. Get your pieces developed first. We're going to be doing the same thing against someone at the 1900 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 1900 region. He's basically 1 point away from being 2000. So this is a very weird one. He's playing the Caro-Kann defense. Let's go d4, d5. Here we're just going to play knight c3, guarding the pawn. He took the pawn, and then we're going to take on e4. Now he plays knight to f6. We're not going to be going for the alien gambit. I want this to be an instructive video. So I'm actually going to take on f6. This is the Tartakol variation, and everything that I'm about to play, if he knows what he's doing, is about to be mainline. For example, I want to put my bishop on d3, but if I do that, I will lose the pawn, so I have to play c3 first. He develops his bishop, now I'll develop my bishop. From here, the goal is just development. He castles his king, and then what I'm going to do here is queen c2. This is called a battery, pointing towards his h7 pawn. So if he's not careful, he will lose that pawn. The main move in this position is to play rook to e8. He decided to play pawn to h6 instead. I'm just going to continue with my development though, knight to e2, because he's trying to check my king. I'm not trying to allow that. I'm going to castle on the next move and just develop my pieces normally. So he develops his bishop to e6, makes some sense. Let me just get my king out the center first and foremost. It's very important that the king is not in the center. Queen c7 is targeting my h2 pawn twice. Let's play pawn to h3, just moving it forward. And I'm just trying to complete my development here, to be honest. For example, bishop to e3, develop my last piece. I'm thinking of playing f4 though. f4 followed by f5 is definitely an idea, especially if he plays knight to d7, because his bishop is not going to have a lot of squares to move to. So he did play knight to d7, and the regular move is bishop e3, but f4 has to be something. Like, if he plays a careless move, pawn to f5 traps his bishop. So I think he has to move the knight again, and then once he moves the knight, okay, or he could play pawn to c5. Is that bishop trapped? Wait. If I play f5, where does the bishop go? d5. But then what happens when I play c4? Where does the bishop go? If he ignores the threat and takes, then I'm just going to take. But what if f5, bishop here, c4, bishop back to c6, and then I play d5? Where does the bishop go? The bishop is trapped. Let's hit him with f5, 13 moves in, and we're winning a bishop. Very, very nice idea in this position. Yeah, there's nothing he could do. So bishop to d5, we spoke about that. Maybe he sacrifices bishop to expose my king, but hey, let's go for c4. He could do whatever he wants here. I will be ahead by a piece. And once I'm ahead by a piece, I'm just going to be trading pieces left and right so that way it's very simple for me to play. And that's how I'm going to win this game. I'm not going to lie though. He needs to sack the bishop, take here, and if my knight takes bishop to c5 is not a pin because my king is going to be on g2. Yeah, he's in trouble then. He's in trouble. He sacked the bishop. Let's just take the bishop. And then he took on d4. So I'm just clearly ahead by a piece here. There's no tricks. Knight takes d4. He has no checks on my king. My king is a bit exposed though, so I need to be careful. I'm also thinking of moves like knight to b5, hitting the queen and the bishop. But I definitely need to finish my development first. Hmm. Okay, rook to e8 is a nice move because if I play knight b5, hits the queen, queen check, and I won't be able to block the check. I think that's what his idea is. So I need to play bishop to e4 first, so that way he really has no checks on my king. So let's go bishop to e4. Nice. If he plays knight c5, then knight to b5 makes sense. I think he needs to play pawn to a6 in this position, so that way I'm not able to play knight to b5. And I'll probably just play bishop to b2. Like I'm just trying to develop my bishop, get my a-rook in the game, and then I'll be comfortable. For now, I'm not the most comfortable because my king is slightly weak, just slightly. Okay, he found a6. He found a6. We need to develop now. We definitely need to develop. I do not see why I should not play bishop to d2. It's the only square that makes sense and keeps my bishop guarded. So has to be bishop to d2. I have an unprotected knight. I am aware of that. I will guard my knight soon. I was expecting bishop to h2 because he wants to play queen to g3, check, and then once my king move, he takes here. But that does not work though. Like, what if I just play knight back to f3, attacks the bishop? If he checks, my king goes here. He has no more checks on my king, and I'm just gonna take the bishop next move. It's a bit risky though, I'm not gonna lie. Am I gonna play that move? You know what? I'm gonna go for it. Let's just play knight battle f3. I'm allowing him to check me on g3, knowing that once I move my king, if he takes on h3, my knight takes on h2, and I'm going to be ahead by even more material. I think the best he could do here is actually just pull his bishop back and just admit that his move did not work. But let's see, if he wants to take the aggressive route, that's on him. Okay, he admit that it did not work. He pulls his bishop back to f4. Like, I want to trade, but if I take the bishop, his queen takes, there's too many pieces coming in. His rook is pointing in. I do not want to trade like that. I prefer to trade on my terms, to be honest. Like, I'm thinking bishop to d5, but then the rook comes in with check. I'm thinking knight to d4, but then I'm going to lose a piece. I'm thinking rook to d1 though, and then if he takes, my rook takes, his queen is still able to take though. But then I'll just move my bishop and I'll save. Let's get all the pieces in the game. It can't be bad to get as much pieces as possible in the game. I'm ahead by a piece and all my pieces are in the game. Plus, his rook on f8, you can't tell what that rook is doing. So he took on d2, and I'm just going to take with the rook here. I mean, taking with the knight is something. I guess he wants to put his queen here, but that doesn't really do much. Yeah, let's just take with the rook. Like, if he wants to trade, that's on him. I'm ahead by 2 points. Let him keep trading. Knight c5 makes some sense. He's attacking my bishop. Bishop has to move, but bishops needs to be centralized. Let's play bishop to d5. I'm also putting my bishop on the same line as his king. The only move that I'm slightly scared of here is queen to f4, but because it puts the queen on the same line as my rook, I don't think it does anything. For example, what if I hit him with knight h2 or knight d4? Okay, knight h2, he gives a check here. My king goes back to h1, and then my rook is able to go to g2 and attack the queen. Let's go with knight to h2. The games are getting very high level. We're playing against 2000 rated players now, but his queen definitely has to move. This is called a discovered attack. He moves his queen to g5 with check. If I block with the knight, then I lose the knight. But once I pull my king back to h1, there is no more checks. And I'm going to play rook g2, rook g1, double up my rooks on his g7 pawn, and I'm going to win that pawn, and he could get checkmated. Let's see. Okay, so he plays rook to e3. Nice move. Nice move. Because he's attacking my pawn. Okay, rook to g2. He moves his queen to h4. Hit him with rook to g1. He takes my pawn on h2. Take his pawn on g7. The king has to move. And how do I continue from there? Oh, queen to g2. Has to be queen to g2. Let's go rook to g2 here. Hit the queen. Queen has to move. Once the queen moves, we double up on the g file. Notice how he's trying to attack my king, but I'm always looking for ways to attack his king as well. Why? Because offense is the best defense. If you have to defend against something, the best way to do it is attack something else. So he moves his queen to h4. We saw this. Now we play rook to g1. That's fine. Let's allow him to take the knight. I mean, he really has no way to protect this pawn. So he kind of have to take the knight, to be honest. So he took with the rook, and I actually prefer him to take with the rook. Look at this. Rook takes g7 check. The king has to go here, and then I'm going to play queen to g2, tripling up my pieces on the g file. My knight is adequately guarded on h2, and I'm actually threatening checkmate on g8, and I'm also threatening checkmate on h7. It's going to be a mating too. Hopefully you guys knew what I'm talking about, but it's actually GG's here. He's either going to resign or he's going to sacrifice one of his rooks, but it's GG's. Yep, the opponent resigns. We're going to be doing the same thing against someone at the 2000 level. Stick around. Our opponent is now in the 2000 level and he started off by playing e4. Let's just hit him with e5. We're going to be ending this video with a blast. He plays knight to f3, attacking my pawn. I'm going to play knight c6, defending my pawn. And we're playing an Italian game. Now remember, against the Italian game, I'm always going to be recommending the two knights defense because we're not afraid of any fried liver attack. We know that knight c3 is a mistake, and that's why pawn to d3 is the best move. Now, after pawn to d3, let's just continue with our development. Now I have three pieces developed. He plays pawn to c3. This is actually the aggressive, well, it's not the aggressive, but it's the more positional way how the higher rated players play. I mean, the guys in the 2000 level. But let's just keep developing. I'm actually going to play pawn to d6. It prepares to get my bishop developed, and I'm actually going to, after he castles, we don't necessarily want to pin the knight because we can't apply pressure to the knight. I'm going to first play a6. And you're probably asking, why am I playing unnecessary pawn move? That's because I want to be able to pull my bishop back to a7. This is actually all theoretical stuff. I don't want the opponent to be able to play pawn to d4 and attack my bishop. He plays rook to e1, and this is where I need to figure out what to do. Again, pinning the knight does not help, so I either want to develop my bishop to e6 or simply castle my king. Now, let's start by playing bishop to e6. Development is very important. Now I have four of my minor pieces developed. I'm just going to castle my king on the next move. My development is going to be complete. My opponent pulls the bishop back to c2. Usually when players play bishop c2, they want to keep as much pieces on the board to outmaneuver their opponent. So he pulls his bishop back. I'm thinking of castling, but then he's going to either go bishop g5 or knight g5. So let's play h6 first. First, I'm going to play h6, and then I'm going to castle on the next move. This is going to be a nice high-level game. He developed his knight to d2. I could play knight to g4. There's actually a line where I play knight to g4, but I think I need to get my king castled first. Now, depending on what he does, I could actually play knight to g4, threaten the f2 pawn, and then play f5, if I'm not wrong. I could also play d5 here, but if I play d5 and then he takes, and then my knight takes, I could lose a pawn. Or could I? Takes, knight takes, takes, rook takes, sack the bishop, king takes, queen f6 wins the rook. So there's two options here, pawn to d5 or knight to g4. If knight to g4, maybe he has knight to e3. So let's go pawn to d5. I want you guys to notice what I'm doing. After I develop all of my minor pieces, I start looking for ways to do a pawn break on the opponent in the center of the board. So he took, let's just take with the knight, knowing that it's not safe for him to take on e5. Because if he takes on e5, oh my lord, he took on e5. He's 2000 and he took on e5. Okay, it's not a blunder, but he's going to lose a pawn. So I'm thinking if I check no, king takes, I take, then he's not able to play rook takes. But if I take and he decides to play rook takes and then I check, he's just not going to take my bishop. He's going to move the king. So what's the best way to do this? I think it's best to keep the bishop. So let's just take the knight. Again, after rook takes, we're going to sacrifice on f2. King takes f2 is actually a blunder because he's going to lose his rook. So he has to play king to h1 in this position. And then I'm just going to pull my bishop back. I'm not ahead by a pawn, so I'm not going to say he blunder and I'm losing, but this is a good position to get with the black pieces, and this is high level chess. These are the slight advantages that we're trying to search for. So I know that he wants to play d4, so I definitely need to get my bishop out of there. I'm actually going to put my bishop on b6 because Eventually, I want to play moves like c6 and pull my bishop back to c7, attacking his rook and pointing towards his h2 pawn. That's how I'm going to be able to attack his king. However, both of his bishops are pointing towards my king, so it's a crazy game. It's a crazy game. He plays d4. Now you could really see the bishops pointing towards my king. And c5 could also be a threat. Let's start by playing pawn to c6, especially since my bishop is pointing towards a pawn chain. You never want to have your bishops pointing towards pawn chain. So I'm definitely going to pull my bishop back to c7. It also forces his rook out of my half of the board. And keep in mind, we do not want to allow the opponent's pieces on our half of the board. So he moves his queen to d3. He is threatening a checkmate on f6. I have to be super careful now because if I play g6, I lose this pawn. If I play f5, I lose my bishop. So I have to pull my knight back to f6. I mean, sometimes you just have to play some defensive move. Now, his idea in this position is to try to find a way to get rid of my knight. Like, if he's able to get rid of my knight in this position, I could be losing the game. Now, bishop to h6, I'm actually worried about bishop takes h6. Because then if I takes, he checks my king, and then my king has to move. Then he goes here, and then I pull my knight back to g8. I'm not sure. Things could go left pretty quickly. The rook is in my half of the board. Bishop c7 is my next move. Let's see what he does. Ooh, rook to h5. Ay, ay, ay. Strong move. Strong move. If I touch that rook, I am checkmated. What to do? What to do? He's also threatening to sacrifice his bishop on h6. Okay, things just got out of hand. I'm thinking of playing a move like bishop to c4. That's a nice move. Because if his queen takes my bishop, then I'm able to take his rook. But what else is he gonna do? Queen to f5. Okay, he is able to play queen to f5. But then if he plays queen to f5, pawn to g6 attacks the queen. He is forced to move the queen. And in some universe, I could take the rook. Okay, it's a very weird position. I'm also skewering the queen and the unprotected knight. And worst case scenario, it's a surprise move that he did not see. Let's play bishop to c4. I'm thinking of moves like queen to g3 here, but then I just take the rook. I think bishop to c4 is a brilliant, or at least a great move. Let's see. Queen to f5 is the only move where the queen could go, where if my knight takes, I'm still going to get mate. But if he plays queen to f5, I'm going to push a pawn on the side that my king is on, forcing the king to move. And then once the queen moves, I'm going to play knight takes rook. We got him. We got him. Sometimes you can win chess not by doing beautiful attack, but by having, what's the word that Mike Tyson used? Impeccable defensive skills. You notice how I'm defending my position? By playing attacking moves. If you're in a boxing match, you can't just be defending like this. You have to be defending like this. One hand up, back, counter. You have to do it like that. It's GG's no. It's GG's no. So he decided to take with the queen. Let's play knight takes h5. And just like that, we are ahead by an exchange. So I have 2 points than him. The guy is 2000. So we know what to do when we're ahead in material, right? We start trading pieces off the board. He puts the queen back on d3. And I'm just thinking of putting my knight back on f6. But I mean, I like the idea of playing f5, to be honest, because then it just cuts off everything here. And there's no knight g3 because I'm just going to take. If knight e3, however, I don't know. I actually don't know what to do if knight e3. Yeah, maybe I'm just going to pull this back. It's a bit scary though because that's just a very annoying battery and I will just never be able to move my knight. I don't want to play knight f6. Yeah, let's just play f5 here. Maybe knight f6 is the best move, but what just almost happened, if I didn't find that brilliant bishop to c4 defense, probably I would have gotten checkmated. I still need to ensure that I defend my position well. I need to get my bishop off this diagonal, or at least play c5 so that way the bishop is doing something. I need to get my a rook in the game. Once I'm able to get those pieces in the game, then I'll be more confident that I have an advantage. Queen to h3 is definitely a nice move. He is attacking my unprotected knight, and if I pull my knight back to f6, he wins a pawn. Yo, this guy's just not giving up. Okay, so obviously we're gonna play queen to e8 here. He could still win this pawn, but that's a very risky way to win a pawn. So Let's start with queen to e8, guarding the knight. Okay, it's tricky now. It's weird because if his bishop takes the pawn, his knight on f1 is unprotected. So things could happen. That's all I have to say. For example, I could play g6. Oh, but then he has a check. Or I could just play queen to e. I'm telling you, things could happen. Let's see what he plays. He develops his bishop to d2 first. That makes a lot of sense. The rook is going to swing in the game and attack my queen. The good thing is he's giving me some time to defend my pawn. The bad thing is if I put my queen here, I lose my queen. If I put my queen here, my queen is on the same line as his bishop. And then he has moves like knight to e3. It's just drama. I think maybe I have to eventually give him back a pawn, but I should still be better. Let's go queen to g6. This is a very risky move, by the way. I'm volunteering to put my queen on the same diagonal as the opponent's bishop. If you're going to be playing a move like this in chess, you have to ensure that it is backed by very good calculation. And my opponent played the only move that I was afraid of, knight to e3, attacking f5, and my time is also running out. Let's go knight to f4 here. Attacks the opponent's queen, forcing the queen to move. And then if he attacks my knight, I pull my bishop back, guard the knight. It's drama. No, it's just drama at this point. I haven't told anyone to like the video, but if you like the video, feel free to like the video, like or leave a comment. Queen to f3 was played. He attacks my knight. Good time to get my bishop in the game. Yo, I do not like this position because I'm gonna lose this pawn regardless, man. Ooh, okay, let's guard it. Let's guard the knight for now. He's gonna play g3. He's definitely gonna play g3. And if I play knight h3, bishop takes h3, and then I have to shake his hand. So that's GG's. Unless I'm able to sack. No, there's no sack. Okay, I have to just play fast from this point. I want to make it a situation where, worst case scenario, I'm able to flag him. But I like my position, I have more material than him. So he plays rook to f8. That's too interesting. G3 is coming, I know that. F5 is dead, I also know that. So I'm 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 probably just gonna put my knight on e6. Where do I put the knight? Maybe on d5. So I think the move here needs to be rook to d8. And I want to keep my pieces on dark squares, by the way. So oh, I missed that move. Wait, did I miss anything? Yes. Yo, that's a good move, bro. Okay, let's think. He's threatening to fork, so I have to react to it. If I take on g2, queen takes, knight g2, knight, yeah, I have to take. Let's just take and see what happens. That's a very good move. No, I takes, and it looks like he wins back the piece. Now he's the one who is ahead by a pawn. Yo, this guy is good, and he has more time on the clock. Okay, if I takes, queen takes, I don't think I want to trade. I don't want to trade. Let's go bishop to b6. I was just about to say I'm gonna flag him, but I'm the one who's getting flagged. Okay, in order to win this game, it's gonna take a miracle. Okay, bishop here, he wants to trade. We do not want to trade. Let's pull the queen back. That's a very strong bishop, by the way. Probably gonna go king h7. Okay, he really wants to trade. Let's go king here. It's gonna be an endgame. It's gonna be an endgame. Let's just take. Maybe he wants to attack this pawn. Let's go rook d7, ensuring that I keep the pawn guarded. Okay, let's pull the bishop back. Okay, c5 would have been a nice move. But yeah, as I said, at this point in the game, speed is just the more important thing. If he takes, he gets mate. I'm going to take on the next move. He moves his rook. Let's just take here. No, oh, he took with the bishop. That's interesting. Let's go bishop to f6. Again, if he takes, then I'm going to checkmate him. Otherwise, I'm going to takes, and then I'm going to win a pawn. I won back my pawn. It's crazy because my strategy was always to bring these players in the end game and beat them in the end game. But I'm not going to act like I'm better here. Like, the position is just equal. But it's just a matter of speed and who is going to blunder in this end game, basically. Okay, let's push. It's just a matter of speed and who is going to blunder in this end game. Oh, he wants a draw. Ouch. Yo, this is weird. I could very much lose this game. very much. Now my rook is trapped. Oh God. My rook is just trapped. Oh yeah, he messed it up. He shouldn't have done that. Yeah, yo, this guy's out. Yo, this am I losing now? The fruit juice? Okay, I'm gonna flag him. It's drawn, but we're gonna flag him, unfortunately. He played very well though, and I have to commend him for that. But we have to flag him. Okay, I'm gonna win the pawn, and then it's just a draw. He blundered his rook. Oh no. Good game, bro. Good game. Good game.